Anyways,
How we looking, Nicole?
I think we're looking good.
Okay.
Hey
Yeah,
everyone.
we're looking good.
look
I'm
at
seeing
that.
everyone now, and I'm like, damn.
Hey
Hell yeah.
everyone.
Let's
Welcome
go.
to Red Planet. Welcome chatters. Sorry about the delay. We had some transportation complications. Everything is fine. We're good. How's the chat doing? How's chatters doing? Press 1 if you're having a pretty good day. You know, the best we can do these days, I think it's a success. We have a pretty good day.
Pretty good.
0 no Rose. Okay, if you don't press a 1, hopefully by the end of today's stream you'll be at a 1. We'll make you feel a little better.
Well, should we start with some stuff that'll make people feel better right away? We've got some good news in the news section.
Yeah,
We do. We have a couple. We have a couple things. There's some big things. There's some minor things. Maybe we'll go over the stuff that we got in the notes, and then also there's like a couple things that we can mention just from
Sick.
Twitter or whatever.
I'm gonna post links in Shadowy Cabal so that you can keep up with this. Nicole,
Okay.
Tim, why don't you tell us about the news?
Yeah, cool. So this is one that I thought was kind of interesting. Wait, where was it? Here we go. I think this is like very relevant to all of our kind of stuff. Oh wait, I posted the wrong thing. This other thing.
Is this the thing on the I think it's
Veritas.
On the
right?
Veritas, yeah. So Veritas Tenants Association reaches agreement with San Francisco's largest landlord to end 5-month debt strike in exchange for full rent cancellation.
wow.
So yeah, excellent work by the tenants to organize and earn a seat at the table. Now let's make sure all tenants have a right to organize. Yeah, this is like really cool work. And it's like, I mean, I think it's like it's very on brand with like a lot of the stuff we've been talking about you know, yeah, obviously like, you know, tenants unions and all that kind of stuff like that. But the ability to just just to kind of just keep doing your thing, just to yeah, I mean, like with organization and everything like that, people like skilled organizers, people that know what they're doing and stuff, working with everyday people and just kind of like holding out. And you know, it's like, it's pretty amazing. Like, where was it? In here somewhere there's like I can't remember how much it was. Yeah, more than 18,000 households had asked for over 289.4 million in rent and utility assistance as of last week. This amount is nearly 60% more than what is currently allocated to San Franciscans. So like that's, I mean, that's like a huge amount, and like, you can imagine why, like at the moment with all the stuff that's kind of going on. And yeah, it's yeah, so what was it? The VTA won a written commitment from Veritas to cancel all remaining rent debt for Veritas tenants. So that's the debt that they've built up, you know, like people are not being able to pay their rent or whatever. They've accrued this debt sort of thing that's being held over them. So that's, yeah, a commitment from Veritas to cancel that.
But can I say what they
yeah.
did to what their strike was? They stopped paying that debt back, right?
Yeah.
So that it was phrased like the VTAs agreed to stop their strike of not paying their debts, and in return, Veritas is canceling the debts. And it's like, that's not actually an agreement. Like, that's just a huge dub. Like,
right.
Yeah.
They fucking win. Like,
Yeah. Like they've conceded, like they've obviously like conceded,
Yeah.
and the union has won.
That's
right?
a really
You know what I
good
mean?
note that you made, that it's not an agreement. These little sneaky little ways to make it look like,
Yeah,
okay, we allow them to no, it's they were muscled out of this and
Right.
forced to cough up. And that's why I think we need to keep pushing this point home, that when you organize, you're not like asking in a very persuasive way, you are making them. They have to.
Yeah. Malcolm X said power only respects power.
That's right.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That, I mean, that's the thing. It's like, you know, it's like they have like the power of capital, but then, you know, there's like people power of like, you know, just everyone just kind of like being aligned, working towards common goals. So that's awesome. Yeah.
Can I add a note on that, which is that from the organizing with London Renters Union that I've done. By the way, organizing interview with the London Renters Union is out now. The first one, that was last week's organizing interview. So I've been talking about this for ages. I hope people are hyped about it. Organizing Interviews is a show where I talk to organizers and activists from around the world on my channel, Sophie from Mars. And I did one with London Renters Union professional organizer Claire. So go check that out.
Go check it out.
It was good. But I was going to say, this thing, like the biggest landlord in the whole of San Francisco is Veritas, which I looked them up, and they're Veritas Investments firm. Like they're just a landlord who just like treating real estate as an investment, which is why they're such faceless corporate pieces of shit. It's their portfolio. And one of the biggest landlords that London Renters Union has been fighting for ages is called Clarion, and I don't mind naming them because they're fucking bastards. They suck so bad, and they're like a non-profit. Like, it's interesting to see how the struggle manifests in different ways around the world, because here, like, they're going against a corporate landlord who are just an investment firm, and then like here in London, Clarion are like a non-profit and they're a housing association, so you assume that they would be there to help the tenants, and they're like awful. I've heard these stories about just like it's raining indoors because their pipes are that leaky, and like there's no lights, and there's mold, and this is all in one apartment, and she's got kids as well, and shit like this, and it's just the fucking worst.
But they're a non-profit.
Is my point, really?
Like, there's something going on there. But that's it. It's a huge W. Huge W. What is this? Someone in the chat saying, what is it? JMM1610 says, Veritas has also been the ones that had the cops strip the tents from SF underbridge homeless. So there we go. So Veritas
makes sense.
Huge. Because that'll be, like their property values going down because of the homeless population, etc., etc.
Right.
The next one is, I accidentally put the wrong link in the notes before, but I just replaced it. Over in Chile, where Gabriel Boric just got in. This is like something where it's like still kind of like, within electoral politics. So, like, well, I mean, this is what this episode's going to be all about.
Right. That's true,
But I just think that it's really interesting that so that's the wrong link that's up there. If you have a look at the notes, it's so
it's in
Maya Fernandez.
Okay, can someone link it in the Shadowy Cabal so I can make sure I can pull up the right one?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, sorry, I just put it in the notes. But yeah, anyway, Maya Fernandez, granddaughter of Salvador Allende. Allende, is that how you say it? Allende?
I think so.
Yes, Allende.
Will be the new Minister of Defense. So yeah, Salvador Allende was the socialist president of Chile, like in the 70s, who got removed from government by a far right coup.
Well, it's an interesting thing. There's like a big sculpture of his glasses with a bullet hole in one of the lenses. In I think one of the Chilean government buildings. I think that's what it was. But it's somewhere anyway, because it's like he killed himself while the coup was happening. And it's like, by putting a gun up to his eye, right? Sure,
yeah,
guys.
sure.
Like
100%.
Yeah. That's how people do that. That's yeah, totally. So it's like one of those things, and she's a member of the Socialist Party. So it's like, this is still kind of like. So he just released his cabinet ministers and everything like that, like within the last week. And there's ups and downs in there. There's some people that are good. There's some people, but it's just like, this is electoralism, right? So yeah, which is something we'll probably be talking a little bit more about in this episode. But I think that's kind of an interesting thing. And I think it kind of also signals like Chile is going through this kind of this swing back left at the moment, and it's kind of seen as like a coming home kind of thing, for like socialism in Chile. So I thought this was like a really interesting kind of thing where it's like literally like the descendants of Allende himself is coming back.
I mean, my favorite protest sign I ever saw was one against the previous regime, where someone with a sign said, "Neoliberalism was born in Chile and it will die in Chile." And I'm like, oh, that's good. Oh,
that's why it's such a dub, right? Because it's like, again, it's like, this is where neoliberalism started. It's so huge for the people there.
Yeah,
I've seen a lot of people being really dismissive and just being like, "Well, it's not a revolution." And it's like, but I think it's definitely going to make probably going to make life better for a lot of people at the moment. So we got to take the dubs where we can.
Yeah, and like you're saying, it does. We are here to talk today about when electoralism does matter. But also, just one brief pause, and I'll try and make the whole of the shock doctrine really concise here, but like we in the imperial core often think of in neoliberalism as a market mode where like we just I don't fucking know. What is it? Fetishism of the marketplace. Thinking that the free market can solve every problem. Like, it's just hardcore liberalism. But that's not the whole history of it. Like, outside the imperial core where we have all these wonderful free market solutions, they were doing genocides to, like, make this shit happen and enforce it on the whole world. And the first one the first horrific regime of torture and rape and murder that they implemented was in Chile. And that's, so honestly, turning that shit back, even if it's through electoralism,
it's better than nothing, right? It's better than nothing, yeah. And it kind of it's something that people in the imperial core love to criticize all the time, innit? Like you say, like people, they're just like, oh, you're doing it wrong. Like like Tim said, some people are criticizing it, saying, oh, it's not a revolution. Like, well, what do you want? Like, what kind of a revolution do you want? Do you know what I mean? Like,
and I'm sure there's like people over there that are still pushing towards, revolutionary socialism or whatever project they got going. Like, there's like, like just because this is happening doesn't mean they're, like they put that on pause or anything like that.
Right.
But and Box Full of Leaves in the chat also points out that between this, Peru, Bolivia, and the possible Lula election in Brazil, it'll be interesting to see what comes out of South America. It would be amazing to see a kind of South America that is kind of getting back to socialism.
A sort of red continent, if you will. Like maybe the red is spreading, and we'll actually wind up with some kind of whole.
Like a planet,
I lost the thought. I lost the.
Yeah, what could it be?
It's gone.
But yeah, no, and so we had some other little things. I just did, I asked a question on Twitter about, like, what are some good things that happened this week? And so we got, there's a bunch of, like, people that said some really good personal news, which is great, but there was, a couple good things in here. There was, they just started the HIV mRNA vaccine trials yesterday, which is great. That's, like, a huge thing there. There was a Long Island Amazon branch forced to vote on unionization. That's great. And what else? There was some good stuff. Butterflies have taken over Melbourne. Always good.
Good. Fuck yeah. Something happened last week, which I didn't announce in the middle of the show because I wasn't sure about how professional it would be of me to talk about, but I sent Mule the link to it. And then, so if you watch the VOD back from last week, you can see me watching the camera really closely while I wait for Mule to see the link. And then he's like cracking up, and then I'm cracking up, but you can see it at the one point in the VOD. Anyway, the lead of famous neo-Nazi band Screwdriver got COVID and died because he wasn't vaccinated, and he said COVID was just a lefty Jewish plot. And honestly, fuck that guy.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah, Screwdriver are fucking terrible. They I mean, if you're not familiar with them, they're probably the biggest, like, most influential neo-Nazi music act ever. Like, throughout, like, punk, heavy metal, and all this kind of stuff. Like, a lot of, even like NSBM and stuff, a lot of guys that became big in that scene all came from, like, Screwdriver tribute bands and shit like that, and it's like they were like an immense force. And there's like this weird thing where a lot of people will, even non-racist people will be like, oh yeah, but their first album was really sick though. But it's not. Like, it's shit. And I think it's like they kind of got like worshipped because they were the first band, and they were like the only band in that kind of scene that there was for a long time, so people kind of deified them. And it was like one of those things, like how people just kind of make excuses because they're like, oh yeah, but they got some good riffs or whatever. It's like, no, they don't.
So I just want to clarify as well, because there's some people in the chat, it's Screwdriver with a K, right?
Yes.
So because there's every chance that someone out there might be a little startup musician calling themselves Screwdriver. They have no idea about this guy.
Good guy, Mule.
It's Screwdriver with a K.
But
just
we are not here to talk about the very, very funny death of
the Jewish communist plot that took down Screwdriver. Fuck, I wish. Hey, that would be like a really good Inglourious Bastards kind of movie,
right.
A bunch of like communist punks take out Screwdriver. Fuck yeah, that would be awesome.
Someone says that giant pandas aren't endangered anymore.
Oh, that's nice.
That's
nice.
a dub. Yeah, that's a huge dub.
Right. Yeah. But we're not here to talk about the very, very funny death of Big Merv from Screwdriver. We are here to talk about non-reformist reforms.
Yes.
A confusing term, right?
It is. Yeah. Mule was asking me about it the other day, and he kind of had it like the other way. How did you think it was? Which way around did you think it was?
I thought it was when... No, I can't remember. Because
you thought it was
just
like
remember
a
the
reform that does absolutely nothing.
Yes.
Therefore, it doesn't even reform anything. But it's like reforms don't even really. That's everything. That's all the policies, right?
Yeah, that makes sense.
We were all pretty black-pilled on electoralism, right? Chat, we're all pretty black-pilled at this point.
That's how black-pilled I was. I just thought it was like, it's something that won't do anything. Like,
It's like most reforms.
Give me a 1 in chat if you vote for the Democrat who blasts you in the ass, or a 0 if you vote for the Republican who blasts you in the ass. There you go. It's all just one big ass blast. Wonderful. But sometimes something comes along which is not useless. And it's really important to know which is which. And that's what this episode is about. That's what the show this week is going to be about, is knowing which policies matter, and therefore knowing when it's worthwhile to engage with electoralism at all. Right.
It's this probably fits into it, right? But like, Jeremy Corbyn, right, as an example of like someone who wanted to bring in policies that were non-reformist reform.
Yes.
And in terms of things like I don't know, for example, free broadband, right? Free broadband is like a thing that will affect lots of poor people in a positive way, and will, as you said when you were explaining it to me the other day, it will aid a lot more people to be part of movements, right? It will actually like help us in our message of like, if Jeremy Corbyn got through, and if the free broadband thing got through, then think about how many people will be watching Red Planet right now, right?
True, and that would be based. But we have some criteria we'll probably go over in a little bit about what makes something a non-reformist reform, and then FT Stig will come on, and he's like super well educated about the Medicare system, like the whole medical system in the UK and in the US, and so he's going to tell us all about that. That's going to be great. But first, I just want to make a distinction between this and harm reduction, because we all had a big conversation about harm reduction, right? Last time the elections were going around. And so if we take, for example, Jeremy Corbyn again, the pandemic started, right? And we knew shit was coming. And maybe this is a little anachronistic to exactly when this is a little wrong for when we actually knew the pandemic was coming. But like the 2019 election was just a few months before the pandemic started. So in hindsight, right, we could say one good reason to vote for Jeremy Corbyn is he definitely would have dealt with the pandemic way better, right, than the Tories did. And that would be a harm reduction discussion. And we're not here to talk about harm reduction today. I'm not saying harm reduction isn't a valid point. I'm also not saying it's true. I'm not saying anything that's not the conversation this is. That's why I want to distinguish this. Like, we are talking about non-reformist reforms. And so, Mule's example was great. Like, free broadband would make a difference. And so should we go into trying to figure out what our definition is? Because there are a few different sets of criteria we could use.
There is quite a few, right? Like, I was looking at the notes here, and there's kind of there's a few different perspectives, but let's go over it, and then let's try and see if we can think of something that is things that are unified between all of these different distinctions.
And I'll say I'll just say it up front. That's going to be the homework this week, is we want chat to go away and have a think about what policies are. I'll say this again at the end. Don't worry, chat. If you're not going to miss it. But we want you to go away and have a think about what are non-reformist reforms, and therefore when it would be worth your while getting involved with electoralism. So, Nicole, I put the Wikipedia for non-reformist reforms in Shadow Cabal. I know it's not the best source, but it does the trick pretty good. So the first thing is I took a little quote out of this, which was Non-reformist reform is a reform that is conceived not in terms of what is possible within the framework of a given system and administration, but in view of what should be made possible in terms of human needs and demands. And that's a pretty nice definition. I quite like that one. We're not thinking about what Biden is likely to do to amend the Keystone Access Pipeline regulation. Yeah. We're going, no, people need their fucking land back, right? Like something that would be like a significant shift on that topic, because it's actually
like actual land reform.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, totally. So things that actually work towards revolutionary goals, as opposed to just like mitigating the harm from the existing capitalism or hegemony or whatever, hegemonic systems. Interesting. Because I mean, I think there's like a lot of things that people would point to and be like, oh well, so like any kind of actually, like a lot of people were concerned with with this recent Chilean election with Boric getting in, because the guy that he was running against, Cast, was like super conservative, and a lot of queer people were really worried that he was going to do something, because they only just legalized same-sex marriage in Chile, and there was huge protests. There was like clashes in the street with cops and stuff like that, and because Cast is kind of like this law and order tough guy conservative, they were like, that was a lot of his campaign was just using that as kind of like ammunition. So like a lot of people were saying, like, if he gets in, like, we're probably going to have to leave the country because things are going to get a lot worse. So for things that, like voting for Boric, where it's like he's going to get in and he's probably going to make life easier for queer people in the most parts.
Yeah.
Like, would you say, because there's like, okay, so that's harm reduction, because like people aren't getting like literally harmed, but then also it's like, if you're not at risk of just being fucking, like I don't know.
Yeah, well, it's like, the question is it the because the non-reformist reformers would refer to the policies. So I guess what would be the example of the policy Boric puts in this point?
Yeah.
Did Boric put in like legalizing same-sex marriage?
I think it came in just before he came in. But it was like, it was like a really big, like, it was like a campaign thing for both of them, where Boric is like, I'm the guy that's gonna, make things safer for you, and Cast was like the one where it's like, actually, cops are, cops have got something here, like beating you up in the streets is good. So it's kind of like, I guess, because what I'm trying to get at, like, I mean, like, I don't have a specific policy in mind, is like the idea of where something reduces harm to the point where it means that people can actually go out and agitate in the streets, and people can actually work towards revolutionary goals. But then it's kind of like, is that just too far removed, where it's like...
Well, no, I feel like if we go on the definition we've already... So maybe this is a good point at which we'd start using different criteria, but the definition we already read out was, it's conceived not in terms of what's possible within the framework of a given system and administration, but in view of what should be made possible in terms of human needs and demands. And I'm like, so if we think of it as legalizing same-sex marriage, that's absolutely a non-reformist reform, because they didn't just go, can we do it? They said it has to happen, and they made it happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then, so if you're like, if we're going to frame it in terms of that policy specifically, someone could be saying to their neighbor, like, I need you to vote for Boric because he will protect this, which is a serious change to like meet people's basic needs.
Okay, cool, interesting. Okay, well,
so,
should we have a look at some of these other definitions?
Absolutely. So, Nicole, if you go down to the heading criteria for identification in the Wikipedia article, there are a few different ones. There it is. And why don't you read us the Dean Spade set of criteria? So basically, these are just different folks who have tried to define it.
So Dean Spade says, does it provide material relief? And I guess we can think about the example of same-sex marriage in this regard. Does it provide material relief? Does it leave out...
in some senses, yes, because married people often get support from the government for being married as opposed to not being married. So it being legally marriage rather than just a civil partnership, yes.
Does it leave out an especially marginalized part of the affected group? For example, people with the criminal records, people without immigration status. I'm assuming that this is the
I'm assuming no, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does it legitimize or expand a system we are trying to dismantle? I think there's an argument potentially for that being the case.
Someone could argue that marriage is actually a bad system, right? So they could be like, well, no, we actually don't want there to be more marriage. We don't want people to get tax cuts because they're married. We don't want people to have these weird like ownership laws, which like these weird laws which stem from like men owning women. Like maybe, but you could argue maybe, and that's when we're like maybe.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I think that any sort of electoral process, it's in some way, shape, or form legitimizes the system you're trying to dismantle. I think it's always a sticky point, which I think a lot of people emphasize to the point where it blinds them to any utility to electoralism.
Well, let's think about expand. Does it expand marriage as a system? Well, yeah. So this one maybe we might use this example and say, oh, actually, these criteria say maybe it's not a non-reformist reform.
I was thinking that expanding a system, as in relying on the states to provide you your needs, and also legitimizing the state by saying it like rainbow avatar state, essentially. You know what I mean? Because you see that happening all the time. All the time in the Democratic Party in America. America loves to do this, loves to be like, we are the progressive party. See, look, we passed this thing. And then people go, see, no, you are now considered like the good party, and we are going to vote for you and vote blue no matter who, and all that stuff. So totally.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Should we pick a different policy and try that through Dean Spade's criteria?
Sure. I mean, the policy that I think we're going to be discussing today, I don't know if we should like go into that right away, or we should stick with one.
I think it's okay to mention it. It's in the title, isn't it?
It is in the title, right?
Medicare for all, or single payer healthcare, right, for America.
And I eventually want to get to this Medium article, which is how I was introduced to this topic by my viewer Jameson, because one day I was harping on the uselessness of reforms, and he was like, "Wait a minute." So I learned a lot about this interesting existence of a non-reformist reform. But
fun.
I guess do you want to jump into Medicare for all? Let's okay.
Sure. So does it provide material relief?
Chat.
Yes.
One is yes.
Surely.
Whoops.
If you believe.
That's true. Yeah,
everyone,
we can get chat involved. That's a good point.
Get chat involved.
Chat. If you think that Medicare for all provides material relief, hit me with a 1. If not, 0. And it'll be 1 for yes, 0 for no on every question. Right.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yep, lots of 1s. I agree.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Does it leave out an especially marginalized part of the affected group? Now, the affected group here is everyone who could need healthcare. Does Medicare for all leave out a marginalized part of that group?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. 1 for yes, 0 for no.
Yeah, I can't think of any way where that... Yeah, right?
I mean, I don't recall the details on Medicare for all, because I know that every politician had their particular tweaks on it. True, but my understanding was it was defined as a non-mean tested program, meaning it should be universal and not required. You didn't have to be required to be like a citizen, right?
Yeah,
if I recall.
Well, so that's an interesting question, right? Because if people put their little tweaks on it, you could wind up with it becoming no longer a non-reformist reform. If Mitch McConnell gets his hands on it and he's like, right, but only if you can show ID or something, right? Then we know it disproportionately affects people without ID, so it disproportionately affects people of color, right? All right. 1 for yes, 0 for no. Does it legitimize or expand a system we are trying to dismantle? Ooh.
That's a tricky one for this one.
Right. Well, I'm like, yeah, kind of.
Okay, so I can speak to this. So I think that on one hand, it legitimizes, like I said before, the states being the provider of rights, the state being the provider of these things. But I do think it serves to delegitimize and to reduce the system that we're actually trying to dismantle, and that system being like private health insurance or private health care.
Insurance industry in general.
And I know that the Medium article discusses this really well, and I think these other people also kind of touch on this, which is the idea that a non-reformist reform would serve to prove of the many things it does, serve to prove as an example to those onlookers of what happens when you do socialize things. Because at least in America, we are taught that everything going private gets better. You privatize it, it gets better, it gets nicer, it gets prettier, it gets faster. So the idea that if you don't privatize, you socialize it, that it would actually be better is kind of proving that, hey, if we take things back to the collective, right, correct. So
Well, I think that we're getting stuck on this question, on this criterion specifically. I'll just read out the last one. Chats, yes for 1 for yes, 0 for no, but then we'll go on to some other criteria possibly. And so the last criterion in Dean Spade's one is, does it mobilize the most affected for an ongoing struggle? Now, I think...
What does mobilize mean?
I'm trying to give some space so chat can start responding with their 1s and 0s. But mobilize means that their time and money and energy isn't used up anymore. And I find this probably the most useful question for determining a non-reformist reform. Because, so if we think about, so I think yes, because I think that if everyone didn't have to pay huge medical bills, have to raise the money to pay huge medical bills, do loads of fucking GoFundMes, for all of the unnecessary nonsense around
the stress of it, the absolute stress of it, the mental health,
and just being able to access healthcare as well. All these things would absolutely mobilize people, I think. But let's try Peter Gelderloos. Mule, do you want to hit us with these criteria?
Yeah. Okay. So we'll just go through and ask chat again, yeah?
Yeah.
Does it seize space in which new social relations can be enacted?
Interesting question.
That's an interesting question.
That's very academic.
And if you're just joining us, when we say it, maybe we should say this in the question, we mean Medicare for all. We're using Medicare for all
in
as
this
an example.
Medicare for all. Yeah.
So not the only non-reformist reform available. Or
this super interesting thing there, because like new social relations, I'm gonna say that's to do with like class divides, you know, racial divides, you know, obviously like sexuality divides, stuff like that. Like, you know, so that's really interesting. Like, in what way would Medicare for all seize space for those new relations to flourish? Like, it's kind of like, would we see more people? I don't know. It's a really tough one, right? It's a really tough one.
Well, I think, I don't know. It's interesting because when you think about the grip that people... Oh, shit. Yeah, Jameson has just kind of said, like, an interesting... Which is kind of like what I was just going to get at. 100% this M4A satisfies this criteria. Everyone is afraid of being fired and losing their employer-based private healthcare. Without that label would be less afraid to organize. That's kind of what I was thinking about, the grip of... that healthcare has on you.
I always forget that like, not everyone is in our hell world here in America. That you're like,
it's a weird thing. Our Tory politicians who are currently in with a huge majority have been trying for years and years to get rid of the NHS, but they're really pushing it through right now. And I honestly think the big part of that is that they are afraid of organizing, and they've been looking at America, and they've literally noticed like all these people are tired all the time. They got no money. They got like, they're stressed, they got debts, right? They can't fight back. So privatizing healthcare is a really effective way of distracting the working class with something. Because this is the thing, when we talk about distractions, it sounds like we're talking about things that are trivial. And obviously your health isn't trivial. Like, often distractions are just real things that you genuinely have to go take care of. In fact, that's the most effective kind of distraction, isn't it?
So I reckon that's a great point from Jameson. Should we?
So it does.
So the next one, does it spread awareness of its ideas? Participatory, not passive. Now that addendum in the brackets is interesting. Participatory, not passive. So it's saying just by virtue of it existing. Doesn't count if it spreads awareness of its ideas, right? So it has to be participatory. Gang, what do we think?
So is that saying that it
I don't know what that means.
It's encouraging people to actively participate, like actively what does that? Does that mean that it's kind of like not something that just kind of
So in the case of Medicare for all, I would say that everyone would benefit. Not everyone would benefit from it because some people are already rich and they already have healthcare. But it does spread awareness of the possibility. We were just saying this, right? It spreads awareness of the possibility of socializing everything.
Yes.
Because everyone will participate in Medicare for all if Medicare for all passes, because they'll get free healthcare. Right.
Yeah. And then you can start, you know, like, and I think like something like that would be huge in the States when people go like, okay, well, we just, you know, we like nationalized all these healthcare providers or whatever like that. Like, what else can we do? You know, like, what else can we push for?
This is an interesting note that I've just thought of, which I think, like, we talk a lot about the official position of our show and how we're saying that we think that governments have made it impossible for people to just like legally and civilly and peacefully protest. And so we're going to see more and more of people like smashing shit up, obstructing systems, resisting systems, and destroying systems, like by just any means necessary. And to understand the other side of that, right, what we're talking about today is like, these are policies that they could put in if they wanted to not have people do those things, right?
Exactly.
Like, and sometimes governments genuinely, when they are confronted by serious organizing, will respond by chucking out a few of these kinds of policies that they could have done any time. They just easily could have done them any time, but they just give you little victories or huge victories, like to make you feel satisfied with it.
Like slightly raise the minimum wage or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. And then everyone's like, we did it. Woo,
Yeah, it's almost like the infinite accumulation of, you know, a capital is incredibly short-sighted. Who'd have thought? So, like, the next one. Let's have a look here.
Can I quickly speak on what I think this is? So, real quick.
Sure.
The way that I read this, and I think Peter could be a little more clear with these points, Peter.
I agree.
Yeah.
Me too.
But,
Peter, little crit from Red Planet here. Come on.
But the way I read this is... Does the system as it exists something that you are actively having to engage in and therefore have to acknowledge its benefit, or is it something that is so in the background that you can forget about it? And one of the examples of this is, I'm speaking from my public health experience, that in public health we always talk about how good public health is not even seen. Like when your water is clean, when the air is clean, when streets are safe, when there's adequate lighting, no one's like lighting, air, water. Like you don't acknowledge it. So the good public health is invisible to you. And so I would imagine that it would be, if I'm reading this question, this is the way I'm reading it, it would be more on the passive side. And this is why I think that so many people, when we talk about socialized things, they immediately go, oh no, that would be horrible. And I'm like, do you not realize how much is already like that? They don't understand
Very interesting.
roads and things like that. Like it doesn't register them. So that's the way that I'm kind of reading that.
No, that's interesting. Yeah. Okay.
Very interesting because one of the biggest sort of criticisms you find of, I don't know, this comes from all areas of British society, but you do find a lot of British people like saying, we take our NHS for granted. Right, which is what you're saying. Like people take in our country the NHS for granted. It's in the background. It's like we just assume it's always going to be there. So like public health, like clean water, stuff like that. So yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah,
and this is why I think that the right loves to talk about how bad the U.S. Postal Service is, when the same government underfunds it and tries everything they can to make it look as impotent as possible, essentially.
That's exactly what happens with
their
NHS.
Socialization.
That's exactly what they're doing to the NHS right now.
Yeah, 1,000%.
So I don't like Peter's criteria very much. I'm just going to say it. I don't really like these very much. You want to carry on with the last two of them? Because, like the next one is another example of why I don't really like this one.
Yeah, I don't like this either. Like, does it have elite support, right? So
we're talking about electoralism.
Already really,
So anything that's ever going to get passed has elite support.
Yeah.
And anything that's not going to get passed doesn't. So cool. A non-reformist reform is a policy which will never pass. Great. What
Great.
a cool
Thanks,
definition.
Peter. Great, Peter.
Like, also, and let's just like be super cynical for a second. Like, let's be a Elon Musk tech bro and imagine our workforce. Right, we're engaging in like neo-Fordianism, right? We're getting our workforce, and we're like, if we make them happy and healthy and blah 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 blah, they're a better workforce, right? So there are plenty of elites who I think reasonably could support M4A because they're like, well, then they'll be healthier workers and they'll get more done.
They take less sick days.
And this is the way that I divide. This is the way I describe to my child all the time the difference between like a reform and like a non-reformist reform. If you look at Medicare for all, the one policy, Medicare for all, let's pretend that that it's the exact same policy. for both of these candidates. We have Elizabeth Warren, speaking of American politics right now, who is a self-described capitalist who has no intention. She gave Trump a standing ovation when he said that America will never be a socialist country. And she's saying, under my presidency, I will give you Medicare for all. Then you have Bernie Sanders, who, whether or not you think he's truly a socialist or not, describes himself as a socialist and is clearly not a person that is advocating on, at least as his position for capitalism. He is grassroots support. His approach to Medicare for all seems far more in line with a non-reformist reform. But so this is the same, essentially the same policy, but in like we were describing before, like sometimes it's sometimes these things can be used to help to reinforce, make healthier workers, so more production. And I feel like that's an Elizabeth Warren approach. And so I do think there are sinister ways of sneakily taking something that might appear to be a non-reformist reform and to be like sneakily guide it toward more of a thing that legitimizes and strengthens the status quo.
Yeah, and all of this is a good example of how non-reformist reforms could come into play in, for example, the Democratic primaries, but they can't really come into play in the general election. Like, it's very rare for a presidential candidate to change halfway through and be like, oh yeah, I do want Medicare for all. Right. Or something as serious as that. It would seriously affect their base and it could throw the election for them. So it's like, past a certain point, you're not going to change the policies. And this is why, and also I think this is a bigger part of the episode we're doing today, is like, understanding in terms of policies, not in terms of personalities, is so fucking important. Because literally, like, if your like local town council guy was doing like a local, not town council, I guess like your state legislature, right, was gonna do a socialized medicine for your state, and that exists, I think, in Boston. No, what is it? Massachusetts. I think Massachusetts has some form of pretty like cheap or free healthcare, but like, and they were Republicans, right? You would want to not vote for them. But if you're already in a red state and it's going to be Republicans anyway, right, then you could engage with it as far as like, I do want the guy who's advocating for the thing that would be a non-reformist reform. Like, or again, if it was a Democrat and they were just a really shitty Democrat, like they're really fucking, who's the one? Kirsten Sinema, right? Like everyone's absolute least favorite politician, the epitome of cringe, right? But if they were like Medicare for all, right? You just gotta, like, this is why you have to care about policies and not about like personalities as much. Yeah. But obviously, if someone is, you know, their personality is they're going to brutalize minorities, don't vote for that person. You know, obviously I'm not saying like vote for the guy who's like, you know, a fascist. But I just wanted to offer like my take, because you know, maybe we'll carry on with this criteria, but like my take, and yeah, maybe we'll back and forth with this, but is that we live in a society with, broadly speaking, two classes, right? People who own the means of production and people who don't. And we want everyone to be equal and have an equal relationship to power. And that's a struggle that people are engaging in, a class struggle. And so my one criteria really would be, does this policy make people available to engage in class struggle? That's really my one thing. I would say that's my only criterion, is just like, does it let people not waste time with shit or like waste their money or their effort or their lives on capitalist nonsense? Does it free them from that a little bit? And that's time they could be spending in the class struggle. You know, that's my kind of my one criteria, really. What do you guys think of that?
I think that's the most important criteria.
Harsha Walia's criteria here under here. Has the tactic been effective in exposing or confronting a specific point within the system by either diminishing its moral legitimacy or undermining its functions?
That's I think in Harsha really Walia's criteria, you're saying?
Yeah, it's like it's the only criteria that
right.
Has. Which I think is really interesting, because it's like, it specifically speaks to not just undermining the functions of, you know, like the state that works against the working class or whatever, but diminishing its moral legitimacy, I think is really interesting as well.
I love that. I love that.
Yeah, I think this is like a really good point just in itself, you know. Like some of the other headings have interesting ones as well, like under critical resistance they have like, you know, will we have to undo this later and all this kind of stuff. But I think a lot of that kind of stuff, like, I'm not personally too concerned with. when we talk about this stuff. But I think this one here, Hashawalia, I think this is a really
Nicole,
really
could you scroll down on it
thing.
and show everyone Hashawalia's one?
Yeah,
It's just the next one.
Yeah, it's just the next one. Jamison 89 in chat says Massachusetts had Romney Care, which was what Obamacare was based on. Still has the private health exchange. The only way you could squint at Obamacare could be considered non-reformist reform is that it eliminated insurance companies denying care to people with pre-existing conditions, so everyone can get health care, but they still got to pay for it. So that's all really interesting. And you know who knows loads about Obamacare specifically is our guest this week, FD Signifier.
That's right.
Here we go. FD.
Oh, here we go.
Oh.
Yo.
Hello.
FD.
Hey.
Oh, I hear Hoover noises. I'm going to jump in general and see if I can help.
Okay, cool.
Okay, sweet.
Well, we're going to have this kind of stream right now, so.
Look at that.
I really like this. I love how you look right now.
Yeah. I'm looking very, I'm looking very five head.
Can you position it so the bottom of your mouth extends? Yeah. Now open your mouth. No, up.
Oh, like this?
Yeah. Now open.
Like you're just taking a bite out of the bar.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Hopefully someone takes a screenshot. Yeah, that's exactly what I wanted. Thank you.
Someone can do it on the VOD. It's fine. If you went fast enough, whatever.
We'll do it in post.
Yeah. Nice.
These transitions are iconic. Hope we never grow out of them. We will eventually have a much more polished production. I'm actually going to talk to Nicotine about how she does everything so fancily. Hey.
Our guest this week, FD Signifier.
Hey.
How's it going?
Hi.
All right, here we go.
I'm just coming in hot. I'm coming in and dire need of this coffee.
Yeah, I'm all out.
Dire need of this coffee, y'all. Woo, all right.
FD, do you know about non-reformist reforms? We were just going over some definitions in the chat.
So I looked over the let's just keep going. I looked over the doc, which I'm reopening, cool. But I'm much better at hearing people talk about the thing.
Okay, cool. So I'll just concisely sum back up and then lead into the conversation, which you're really here for. So we have been looking over these criteria with Medicare for All as our example. So a non-reformist reform, according to the quote, is a reform that is conceived not in terms of what is possible within the framework of a given system and administration, but in view of what should be made possible in terms of human needs and demands. So Medicare for All, pretty clear to see how it would meet that definition, because we wouldn't just ask, can Biden do it? We'd be like, people need it, so it's happening. Right. Then there's a few different criteria definitions we looked over just now. So we got some different sets of criteria.
We didn't like these very much.
We kind of found issues with a lot of them.
Yeah.
But Hashawalia had a pretty nice one, which was, has the tactic been effective in exposing or confronting a specific point within the system by either diminishing its moral legitimacy or undermining its functions? Which is a very wordy one, but it's a really nice one, I think.
Yeah,
so,
I think it sums up a lot of good stuff in there.
Right. Like, we were just saying how the American healthcare system essentially disables a lot of people by bogging them down with debt, by making their health shitty, and therefore paralyzes them, and they're not available for class struggle.
Even like tying them to their employers with,
and tying them,
like that.
Huge interconnected thing. Yeah.
And I think Medicare for All definitely does expose that, right? It exposes.
Well, it doesn't just. I think I would say it on the second one. Really, it's it undermines its functions, right? Like, if everyone had healthcare, then they wouldn't be tied to their employers. They wouldn't be struggling with debts, all this stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right. I like that last one a lot. I remember when I was reading over the list of criteria, I wasn't so much iffy about them. I was just thinking, like, what's actionable? You know what I mean? Like, what can I take to people versus what will get likes on Twitter? It's one thing I think about a lot. Whenever we get into certain discourses and thinking about social action as opposed to education, which is still important.
Yeah.
And so that last one I love because, I hate to say it, it kind of lowers the bar but it makes
well, it focuses on the right things, doesn't it?
Yeah. It focuses on it's actionable because so I know one thing I think is useful about me. So I've done a lot of healthcare work in IRL. I've worked for a major major health research organization. My PhD program, my PhD coursework has been around a lot of health, sociology of health, and I've been in like meetings. I've been in the rooms with CDC people. I've written briefs that were supposed to be seen by the governor and had to go through the process of writing this already tame thing.
Right.
And then sending it to a manager and being like, okay, not quite tame enough.
Oh my God. Nice.
So fix that, and then we'll send it to the governor for him not to read it.
Okay. Okay. Cool.
And so, and then the thing I lean on a lot, and I put it in the doc, is I'm older. I am new to identifying as a leftist, and thus being, I'll be 40 this year. I'm deeply invested in the status quo, just by the fact of where I am, my standpoint right now.
Sure.
I'm sitting in my house. I am paying for healthcare through my wife's job now because I left my job to YouTube. Right. I have kids coming downstairs now.
I really like this note that you put in here though. My desire to protect my family, though valid, should not supersede the intentions or needs of others for whom slow progress is unacceptable. Which I think is that's a very really awesome thing to even to acknowledge, because you get a lot of people that are really like you said yourself, you're invested in the status quo, and then you see these people that are like literally like struggling to live, and you get a lot of kind of like in other ways like well-meaning liberal people that are just like, oh, but like if we start having these conversations, that might put my own shit like then might be I might lose something personally, so
I joke with Anansi. I know you all had Anansi on the other day about like throwing bricks at tanks,
right?
And like being in the streets. So I've been in the streets, right? Like I, participated very briefly in Occupy Wall Street. I've been to multiple protests, before I had kids. And I have friends and peers who are still very much in that like space. Yeah. So like and because of that, I understand that there's a I was talking to Alki literally, I think maybe Friday night, kind of thinking about coming on here and how to effectively show up or as a person who, again, is not, when I say invested, I want to be clear to anybody listening, it's not that I think this is right or the right thing to do.
It's material interest.
It's material. Yes. Thank you. But like on the flip side, I have friends who have spilled blood in the last couple of years. You know what I'm saying? Not their own. Yeah. And
okay.
We have to internalize that when we talk about class struggle in the ideal sense, I was telling him, like, I don't like when people use the word revolution because it obfuscates that we're talking about war. We're talking about violence at a material level if we're talking about immediate change. And so I am prepared for that if it comes, but I'm going to be honest in that that last bullet that still works, that's the best that works for me. But if somebody else hits the streets and is like, look, I started it without you. What you gonna do? I'm like, fuck, I guess we in there now. But
yeah, well, this is interesting because I was gonna ask a question which I think you've already answered. Like, if it was going, you'd want to, you'd be like,
it's
okay,
actually ideal what you said. Yeah.
But I guess,
and that's like, a lot of the time, there is that kind of thing where it's like, I think starting a movement, starting a revolution, anything like that, it's like being the person that starts it, or the people that start it, is like the hardest part. Like once something is already going, like other people joining on is like, like that's like if you have a strong movement going, I think it's very natural for other people that maybe like like people that had other commitments or they were invested or whatever like that to change and to jump on board and stuff like that. I think there are a large percentage of people out there that probably naturally just without even thinking themselves of political people would align themselves with like any kind of like leftist uprising or revolution or anything like that.
Probably.
There's like plenty of people out there that like wouldn't consider themselves radicalized, but if they saw people out there in the street marching for like, Medicare for all, anything like that, they'd like, oh yeah, no shit, like that's good, we want to do that or whatever. And I think it's like part of the, the thing as leftists, as communists, whatever you want to call yourself, whatever, is to be the people that, to kick it off sort of thing, and then, appeal to the working class as this is why you should join us,
Well, I feel like seeing a bunch of that in Kazakhstan, right? Like just like a mass uprising because the quality of life became unlivable, right? But like I think that one thing that I think we've really tried to highlight on the show, I think, and Nancy does a great job of highlighting this in their work as well, is how much the violence that comes down is often against like not against people who are like forming a militia so they can overthrow the government. Like, I mean, we can see that plain as day, actually, because like all the fucking right wingers are forming militias to overthrow the government, and the police don't care, right? So like they don't actually care to like crush that, but they do care to use violence to crush like people who are giving water bottles to homeless people during a heat wave. And actually like 99 or 95% of what we would call a revolution, if we're just defining it by like the system's like this system and then it's like that system afterwards, 95% of the effort and organizing involved is about taking care of people. And that's why we talk about dual power on the show. But the thing I guess I wanted to I wanted to ask a question, which was like you said about your kids, you said about having healthcare through your wife's job. And it's like, but obviously you would rather you and your kids just had healthcare if you needed it. Like simple
much better. That would be a much better thing on a multitude of levels.
Right.
So one of the things that I wrote a paper for my comp exams, and it was like, and I put this in the doc, the healthcare system is designed to be shitty at this point.
Yes.
It wasn't ever designed to be all that good, but like what happened with Obamacare, it was, slowly dismantled once they took out the single payer demand or whatever. I don't remember the exact term. And then they just slowly dismantled it until it was ridiculously ineffective at providing healthcare at a reasonable price to enough people. It was never designed to cover undocumented Americans. It was never designed to do a lot of things in terms of addressing systemic inequality within healthcare. But now it's not even designed to provide healthcare at a reasonable price to a lot of people. Now it's literally just a festering sore that makes it untenable on multiple levels.
Can I ask you to kind of give us a bit of a history to Obamacare? Because we just had in chat someone pointing out that actually like it was Romney care first and like all of this, which is like in line with what we're talking about today with like, it's a policy that matters. Don't, not to get overinvested in kind of a politician's personality. Obamacare has kind of an interesting history in that regard, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, the first thing is to think about the fact that America has several presidents. I don't remember the names off beat. I think it was Truman, Wilson, and somebody else had tried that was their thing. Clinton, to try to do some type of socialized healthcare system. And every time the people have rejected it. The people have rejected it greatly because of capitalist propaganda and the investment in conservative ideology in the states, but they've rejected it. And it speaks to a core problem of just getting leftists anything across in America, which is how far the general population is from those ideologies. Then we get to Obama. I'm doing a love video in a couple of weeks, just a good old fashioned Black love video, and I'm talking about Obama, because it's a fascinating story that I think we haven't. There's so much meat to that bone. But long story short, he came in with such a mandate that he knew he was going to get something, and it was like, okay, what can I get with the least amount of political fallout?
Right.
And what he ended up with was this essentially very Republican conservative.
Yeah.
It was Mitt Romney's plan.
Yeah.
A healthcare plan that was designed to improve access more than anything. 1 second, Joe. My wife is messaging me.
Yeah, no worries. It's pretty interesting. Yeah. I guess we'll get back on what FT has to say about that in a sec. But like, just to be clear, in case anyone is confused on this, like, we're not calling Obamacare a non-reformist reform. It's just pertinent to the history of healthcare in America.
Yeah, I would call it a non-reformist reform. Be honest.
Oh, that's really interesting. Okay. Okay. No.
No, I'm sorry. I got that backwards.
Please tell me that. No,
I
that's
got that
great.
backwards. I'm sorry. No.
Oh, okay.
Obamacare is definitely a reform that was.
Reform.
Am I saying this backwards? It was definitely designed to not do a lot.
So that's the radio impression that Mule had for the what
that's what. That's what I thought. Non-reformist reform.
I got a little too hot.
It's okay. You can also call it
one example.
Another way you can call it is revolutionary reform. So maybe that would be more clear.
Yeah.
These are the same terms. Anyways.
Or if you want to call it just a revolutionary policy, like it would cause a big enough shift. But an example that in the Wikipedia article, again, like they gave an example of reformist reforms, which I think is what we call Obamacare, and people say hate crime laws have been an identified example of reformist reform because they add punishing power to institutions, often by including more money for local law enforcement, right? So they're just expanding the power of police rather than doing actually anything to like help people get on better, at least, or whatever other approach you would want to take. And they also got police body cameras have been identified as a reformist reform. I think that's a really good one because it's just like, what the fuck is that supposed to really do? Come on.
Right.
Like,
when they can just
non-lethal.
Yeah, they can turn it on and off. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? The body cams malfunction.
Yeah. So weird how that happens. Reminds me of when what was it called? Baked Alaska had his selfie camera off only for the like minute and a half where he got maced by Antifa. And I'm like, oh, that's weird. You filmed like 8 hours of Charlottesville and turned it off for like that so weird. Anyway,
weird.
Keep going, please. Yeah, so okay, so we are on the same page. Obamacare is not a non-reformist reform. Okay.
Not a revolutionary reform at all.
Nice.
And so it was designed to increase access. And that is just, we want more Americans to have access to what is essentially work, healthcare tied to taxable labor, right? That is what we want. So immediately that excludes undocumented Americans, immediately, right? Because that is how, that's how it works. You don't have a social security number, yada, yada, yada. Yeah. And that was never even like, not even on the table from jump, because they knew that wouldn't fly. And neoliberals, Democrats, they didn't really want that shit. So that's like step one. Step two is the issue with healthcare worldwide, not just in America, is inequality. It's a concept I think I put in there called fundamental causes of health inequality, which basically comes down to, when you are poor, even if you have access to healthcare, it doesn't work the same. It doesn't give you the same amount of health that for per dollar, specifically speaking, for a person who is wealthy, because there's a concept called flexible resources, which means that you will have less opportunity to utilize healthcare in a way that serves you versus a person from a higher socioeconomic status. And I'm gonna use a personal example for this. So my oldest son has ADHD. I am super aware. I've done papers on ADHD. My former employer, we did webinars on ADHD. I'm a former educator. You know what I'm saying? So like, I had, because of my education.
Brief interjection. Yes. I'm just putting the link to fundamental cause theories of health inequality in the chat. Links in the chat there.
Awesome. So because of my education, I can go on Google Scholar and read legit medical research on best practices for ADHD children, especially Black boys. So then at my job, I work with medical professionals. So I got to talk to a woman who spent 25 years in DFACS and counseling to ask her about best practices. I got to talk to several child psychologists and to get advice for free. I got, let's say, a dozen free consultations from experts in the field before I ever got a appointment with my doctor. So then when I got into my doctor, and then my doctor knows I'm educated, and my doctor knows I have good health care, yada, in my background, et cetera. So my doctor's going to respond to me in a certain way, and it becomes this compounding privilege. And I'm saying that as a Black man in America, that access to education and a career path gave me all these things that other little Black boys in my same community, like literally, because I live in a Black neighborhood, but it's, it's not like Atlanta's unique. I'll leave that for another video. But other kids in my community, other kids in my son's school, which is a predominantly Black school, would not have had they'd have had the same access to the same doctor, literally the same doctor, but would not have gotten the same treatment, no matter what that doctor's political principles are, no matter how many critical race theory books that doctor has read. At some point in time, his implicit biases will kick in, and he will treat that poor Black family, that poor Black mother that may come in without a father with their child, and all these other judgment come in, and then that child's on medication immediately, as opposed to maybe cognitive behavioral therapy. And then like, I'm not poo-pooing medication for ADHD, but there are best practices papers written about the overuse of medication in children under 5, yada, yada, yada. I'm kind of rambling, but the point I'm trying to get at is that is how fundamental causes of inequality serve to create health disparity. And if your goal is just to make healthcare more accessible and not to address all the other elements within the system that make inequality happen, no matter what you do, the inequality and the lower health outcomes are going to persist, which they have.
Of course.
Yeah. I think it's a really interesting thing because it's really similar to trans healthcare in the UK, because we have the NHS, of course, which is a wonderful thing, but I'm just hearing myself back through your mic a little bit there, FD, just so you know. We have the NHS, which just means nominally we're supposed to be getting free healthcare for everyone all the time, but the Tories have been trying to deliberately underfund it, make people more frustrated with it, so more people get on private, and then they can easily manage the switch to private so that they can keep the boot on our necks forever. It's wonderful. And one of the fundamental, like you're saying here, like a disparity is that like one of the first hardest hit areas has been trans healthcare, right? And so for me, I had an awful time trying to get onto HRT, and even I know I'm very privileged because like to get onto it, right? The health, like the waiting list is unmanageable at this point. Like it's over 6 years or some shit if you join today, right? So it's just like people aren't doing that. So people have to crowdfund to get like private healthcare instead for like £300 first appointment. Like I know it's not compared to like American healthcare, but it's compared to free here, it's a pretty big deal. And then I've been able to use that letter from the specialist who I paid to see to go around to my GP and everybody else and be like, okay, give me the stuff because I have the specialist on my side. And I know there's huge, even then there's huge privileges I've benefited from in that process. For example, my whiteness. For example, having an audience who I could turn to when I was like, I need this, and I want to crowdfund. So I'm a privileged position on social media. But even then, at the same time, I am experiencing, the other side of an inequality because trans healthcare at all is like way worse than everyone else's healthcare. There are drugs, spironolactone, finasteride, dutasteride, which they will prescribe cis men for balding, and because it like blocks out a little bit of the testosterone. And if you're a cis man and you're like, hey, I'm worried about my hair, you don't even have to be like, I've got a condition. You just be like, I'm worried about my hair. They just give you that shit so easily. And if you're trans, it's this huge process, right? And that's one of the two parts of estrogen HRT is like you need to block the testosterone. So, it's a huge inequality in how treatment works because of an effort to drive out our socialized medicine.
Yeah, there's similar things in New Zealand, right? Like we have like public healthcare that is like in a lot of ways a lot better than what many people have all around the world. But for like trans healthcare, there's like all this stuff like you have to go get a psychological evaluation first, and you have to go to only certain people are able to give that to you. There might not even be one in your city or your area, your town, whatever like that. So you have to do that, and then even like the waiting list, it's like it's free, it's public, but the waiting list to actually get any kind of like any kind of procedures or anything like that could be decades. Which is like wild. Like I've had friends go on the waiting list and they're like, okay, cool, well, like I literally have like 40 years to wait for this.
I mean speaking of like barely any providers, there is one guy in the whole country who does, I don't know if now I think about it, so there was one guy who does bottom surgery for trans men, creating a neo-phallus, right, giving guys dicks, right, good on him. But he's the only guy. He was the only single guy in the whole fucking country. And so literally, like, all the trans men I know, like, when they were talking about bottom surgery, they're literally talking about the same guy. And they're like, and they're talking about, like, their availability and when they're getting theirs booked in. And they're just like, they're commonly saying just like, we realize that we're just talking about this guy's schedule. Like, we're literally just describing this guy's calendar. And now, bottom surgery is not available for trans men at all in the UK. And I don't know if that guy died or if he moved away or fucking what. Like, I'm not saying it's genuinely like all in this guy, because it was a Tory like deliberate move to like remove it as a service. But I don't know if it's that guy retired and they did it at the same time. I don't know what it was, but like, there was one provider and now there's nothing.
Imagine being that guy. You'd be like, I just want to retire, but I can't.
Well, I know someone who literally their surgery was put off by 3 months because that guy was like had like a heart condition.
Oh, wow.
So literally, like he needed some time off. So so the person I know, they put their surgery back.
I can just imagine this like like Lethal Weapon kind of thing, like next week's my retirement, but like, they keep pulling me back in.
Oh, this one last dick surgery is really hard. Shit. Oh no. Yeah.
I want to read Ellie's comment because it pertains to American like healthcare system. Ellie says, I see the inequality starkly from how well I was treated before transitioning and having my mom's insurance and being on Medicaid and having fewer queer healthcare options. And so if you don't know, or Medicaid, Medicaid. And Medicaid is health insurance essentially for people that it's like you have to be at a certain poverty level. And it can be a pretty severe one. And so typically, I don't know about the options provided. So another thing that maybe people that aren't so like well acquainted with how private health insurance works, especially if you're not an American, is that it's not all equal. It's not like you get insurance and now you are insured. One time I signed up for private health insurance on stream. This was a few years ago, and I was showing everyone. I'm like, I want you all to see what the process is like. This is what choice is, and it's all garbage. But there's some that's less garbage than others. But they'll rearrange the ways that it's a monstrosity. But it certainly does not provide equal care for everyone, and it certainly also has certain class-based connotations to it. So if you're like silver level. Yeah. Versus Medicaid, your doctor is going to look at those two people differently.
Yeah. So, man, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No. Go ahead.
So, to kind of like add to Bad Bunny here, what names are we using? Are we using code names? I'm still going to be FD. I don't know what like. And I suck at names in general.
Yeah, Nicole, you can call me whatever. Yeah, Nicole's cool. Yeah.
This is why I changed my branding so I'd have my name in my name. So I'm just like, it's
not
fine.
A bad idea.
It's pretty easy.
Yeah. That is a really good idea, actually.
Because So where was I? So Medicaid and healthcare, even when you have it, it guarantees you access, but there's no very little standard on what that access actually means.
Yeah.
And that's the scary thing about Medicaid for all. I think if we were to get it, it would at least satisfy that bottom rung that we're starting on, because it would force one of the things that people don't understand unless you're in it is that people that use Medicaid get the shittiest of care from their providers. And there's multiple reasons for that. Some of it is just general bias of serving poor and uneducated people. On certain situations, you will get undocumented Americans, the homeless, the unhoused, the mentally ill. That's a lot of that's a portion of who you serve, number one. And then motherfuckers don't even get their money from Medicaid in a timely, reasonable fashion. So if you are a doctor who has read all the books and wants to fight the good fight, and you open up a clinic in the middle of a high needs area, and you're like, I'm going to take Medicaid so I can serve these people, you'll still fuck around and not be able to pay people in your practice because the payouts for Medicaid are they're all fucked up a lot of times. You have to do a whole lot of extra work to get your payments in a timely fashion, if you can get them at all. The rules change all the time because certain states, the state I'm in particular, purposefully obfuscate processes and just so many things.
Yeah, that's interesting. So a clinic might be like, look, we can't risk taking on too many Medicaid cases at once because we just don't know if we're going to be able to pay our staff here. So,
exactly.
When they're looking at what jobs they can take on, they're like, okay, well, we can only fit so many or whatever, which is, something that I didn't even consider, the actual invoicing and getting.
Yeah. It's just the practice of invoicing. And then another thing Nicole pointed out is the class-based branding of the healthcare, where it's do you want the bronze, the silver, or the platinum plan?
That's real.
That's real. That's real. That is a real thing here in the States.
They literally name them typically after those metals, like bronze, like gold, like silver, gold, platinum. I don't know. There's sometimes there's silver, silver something, and then another type of silver. So there's two different types of silvers or something. And so if you walk in with the platinum plan and someone else walks in with Medicaid, it's not it's like a caste system of sorts or something.
Someone in the chat saying
I don't even know if the providers know per se until they charge you. Is that makes sense? And then maybe they'll do it. But real talk, it's just for the intrinsic capitalist nature of our country. That is the key. The key ingredient to that bullshit is I want to know I'm paying more for my health care, and I want to have that shit on my documentation. Because people don't know
with the gold flakes in my little pill bottles.
Yeah, and then even then though, the fucked up thing is because providers operate in these cartels, you might have I have I don't know, at least it's silver. We have at least silver plan. I still can't use it in certain places. There's still people that don't take my insurance because they're part of the other cartel. They're part of United.
Yeah, the in-network, out-network crap. Yeah, exactly. There's so much. I love Bellamy's comment because Bellamy was like, what did you say, Bellamy? Oh my gosh. Bellamy was like, LOL, folks not in the US always make me laugh. Seriously, it's like that? LOL, yes, we're not okay. Yeah, no, it always is wild to be like, I forget how we're so used to this crap that we don't realize how crappy it is, and then somebody else is what?
My shock there, I just have to state, I am a real politics streamer. I do politics. I might be above, but I do politics. I know about the American healthcare system. It's very bad. But when people actually legit say to me, yes, it's like a Paul Verhoeven movie, I'm like, oh, right. What the fuck? This, you know what I mean? It's like an extra level of it's that fucked up. It's okay, yeah.
And I want to add to something that FD said earlier about that it just guarantees you access, because access really, at a certain point, access isn't even access. So like if my deductible, right? That's, I always mix these up, even though I should know these things by now as an adult. But deductible, that's the one where you have to spend that much out of pocket until your insurance kicks in, right? So like if it's that's what it is, right, chat? Yeah. So like that's a thing with health insurance, at least in America, where if I have the silver plan, my deductible will be like $5,000, which means that I can't actually get my health insurance to cover my health, like a lot of my health care. Sometimes there's weird exceptions, but typically it's like you have to spend a certain amount of money first and then you'll get that health insurance. And this is on top of monthly premiums that you spend just to have it under your name. And if you miss any, then they'll boot you out and then you can't get back in until the next open enrollment period, which is typically once a year. So it's like, it's like really, it's so like if I have insurance and I'm spending money on my monthly premiums, a lot of times I won't go to the doctor because it's still too expensive because I can't afford that out of pocket because I haven't reached my deductible yet
to be able $5,000 or whatever.
Right.
You basically have to get shot, and then it's like one strong bill up front.
Yeah.
You know, and then you'll let that get sent to a credit people that
whatever,
call you every
collectors,
day.
Collections,
You let that get sent to collections, and maybe you'll pay it over the next 10 years. But at least you'll have access to your health care that you're already fucking paying for.
At least they can get the bullet out.
For this year.
But then you'll have
you
bad
just have
credit
to plan
score.
to get shot every year.
In the beginning of the year. You have to arrange it for the beginning of the year. But then your credit score tanks on top of like debt and stuff. And then on top, that's one of the multitude of reasons why people can't really own a home. I mean, other than the fact that real estate prices, so on and so forth. But like, if we're all like loaded up with with debt, and it's all like we can't pay it. Can I just say I fucking fuck credit scores? My God, what a horrible.
Yeah, I was gonna say, do they
system.
factor in credit scores when it comes to like health insurance stuff, or
no? Thankfully, that's the one thing.
Okay, because I was gonna say that would be really fucked up.
But your medical bill can affect your credit score, right?
Yeah.
Oh,
okay. Great.
So you will always be able to get access to healthcare under Obamacare.
Yeah. You'll always be able to give them money. Yeah.
Yes, but you will accrue significant debt over time, depending on your healthcare needs.
Yeah.
And that is, and the thing, like to show how this was very much a reform, all of that shit existed before Obamacare. All of it. None of that was changed under Obamacare.
That's
all
crazy.
Which is like, and here's the funny thing, like, so Obamacare, when, how to explain this? There was research about Obamacare and Obama in general, where basically when Americans were asked would they like socialized healthcare, yes. When Americans were asked would they like Obamacare, no. Completely evenly split along racial lines.
There was some,
and that's kind of the thing.
Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to quickly say there's some talk show that did this. They went around and gave people mics to be like, how do you feel about the Affordable Care Act? They're like, I like it. And they're like, what about Obamacare? They're like, no, that's suppressive. It's like, it's the same fucking thing, dude. Anyway, that was hilarious.
And it speaks to, and that's why I think, like, Nancy did a great video. I'm going to talk about Nancy a lot tonight, I see. Their video on American fascism, everybody needs to watch, because and I'm without changing the vibe of the room, certain factions of online leftist discourse focus on dunkable content.
Oh yeah.
And severely miss important history elements, important foundational aspects of how we got here, and where the linchpins of these systems lie, to address, actual to provide venues for actual change. So something like Anansi's American Fascism video is super valuable because it gives a nice timeline of how we got here. And one of the things they talk about, and I have my own concept plan around it, is the pull of conservative thought among Americans who, if you ask them about explicit, I think this has been put out there. If you ask many Americans about explicit socialist, communist policies, one at a time, they were like, "Oh yeah, that."
Yeah.
This is
also true. Most people, just most people in the world, like
literally most people. Yeah,
my girlfriend's dad, who's like just so conservative, but only on the specific topics the TV has been telling him about. Right,
Exactly.
like he's this conservative. Okay, he banned me from coming to the house when he found out I was trans. Banned, and it was over a year until he went back on that. Right, he has advocated for like free, because we don't get our prescriptions for free. We get like treatment, but not prescriptions. He's advocated for like pharmaceuticals to be nationalized without any prompting. We were just talking to him, and he was just like, "Yeah, I just think it should be like this." I think most people are communists, really.
Yeah,
like. Everyone wants everyone to just have everything. Everyone wants that, obviously, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh, and I want to co-sign watching a Nancy's American Fascism video. Fantastic. Yeah. Everything from a Nancy. Just they're so good. Everyone should watch it.
Yeah. It's yeah. And so that's basically it. Like, the thing that we have to, if we're talking about policy, revolutionary policy, so we're talking about legit. So I'm getting away from, because St. Andrew has been radicalizing the shit out of me, and I think I'm starting to scare my wife.
That's what we want to hear, to be honest. Yeah,
get your wife on Red Planet. Let's all chat. Let's do it.
Yeah. Planet, you know what I'm saying? And so, but if I get away from my, starting to lean towards anarchist visions of the future, if we're talking about policy, meaning we're voting for it and we're electing officials and shit, that is always going to be black pilled if we don't find, if we don't brand our shit. We have to like legitimately conceptualize, how do we break the hold of conservative branding that has people literally voting against their best interests, literally talking out both sides of their ass. When it comes to explicit policies, because that's what they do. This is proven through research, as Sophie just mentioned. And until we can do that, we are talking about throwing rocks. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's a weird, like we mentioned this, but just before, above Harsha Walia's one criterion, we were looking at Peter Gelderloos criteria, and one of them was, does it have elite support? And I'm just like, and we all agreed on this when we read it out earlier, but like, who fucking cares? Like yes, it can be an indicator if all the elites are against it, for sure. But also, if all the elites are against it, it's not getting passed. It's not going to get passed. Like here in the UK, we have the House of Commons, which is elected representatives, and then we have the House of Lords, which is an inherited title, and that's the process for our laws getting passed.
Or a board title, if you have enough
or
money.
A board. Yeah, you can buy it too. You could buy being a lord.
Wait. Sorry. So now I'm going to show my ignorance.
Yeah.
Hold up.
No. I'll go through it again.
So it is like what you think it is. Yeah.
We have representatives. We elect in the House of Commons, and then we have a House of Lords. They're lords.
Do they have actual power to like?
Yes.
Legislate?
Yeah.
It's like a separate parliament, right?
There's a reading.
Everything that gets passed in the House of Commons goes to the House of Lords.
Now, to be clear, only the MPs can actually write laws. To be fair.
Okay.
But then it goes back and forth in the House of Commons, and there are amendments to it, and it gets tweaked, and little extra sneaky shit gets shoved in. And then it goes to the House of Lords, and they read it like amendment by amendment, and the Lords decide which bits goes through. So like they can change a law, but only kind of yes, no, change it, and they can pass or fail laws. Like they have complete voting power. And the weird thing is, after everything I've just said, they are the only ones standing in between Britain and full fascism right now. Because, which I usually, trust, I would not be like defending the aristocracy, but I have a friend, in fact I have several, who are trans, who are engaged in activism where they are going to lords and ringing around and having meetings, and they're being like, hey, this policy would be really, really bad. So if you care about human rights, please don't let that one through. And then the lords vote it down. And like it went out of the House of Commons, all our elected representatives, because they gerrymandered it so much that we have all these Tories, and they control the media to make it so that everyone's fucking brain poisoned. So we have all these Tories in the House of Commons. the Lords are the only ones stopping their horrific bills from going through. It's fucking wild.
It's terrifying.
It's insane. It is insane.
Is this Game of Thrones? Like, y'all?
Yeah.
I am so blown. I did not know this, but I need to improve my engagement in international issues. I did not know that. It's
ridiculous.
It's such a paradox that is the case. That literally at this point, because of the constant creep of conservative appeal what's the word we're using? Not reactionary, although that's it. Populism.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
That you're relying on.
Yes.
That's crazy.
Elite. We're relying on elites eventually.
Yeah,
essentially.
I talked about all of this before on the show, but to run you through a really horrifying example really quick, there was a bill called the Police Crimes Sentencing in Courts Bill, which everyone was terrified about because it would essentially eliminate our right to protest completely. Like it was deliberately vague, so it would give police powers to essentially stop any protest any of the time with up to 10 years in prison for protesting. Right, and that was the basis of it. And then it added in all this trespass stuff, which creates perpetuates genocide against Gypsy Romani traveler community. Right, essentially just like anyone who's living nomadically, necessarily they're trespassing, so they go to jail for trespassing. Right, so just all the travelers just in jail. And then they added in shit like you can't lock on. So if you brought a bike lock to a protest for your bike, right, then that's evidence that you were planning to chain yourself to something for protest, therefore way harsher sentence and shit like this. And it got worse and worse and worse and worse. And then the other day it was read in the House of Lords, and the Lords were like, nah.
So that's who killed it?
The House of Lords. The Lords killed it.
It's not dead. It's not dead.
No,
It'll go back to the House of Lords with the amendments in mind, which they can't put through. But then it's also worth mentioning the other bills that they're putting through, which are also increasingly fascist. Is it the national? Oh, what is it?
There's a nationality and borders
nationality and borders
bill, which is all our refugees in camps, just
and people who've lived here for years. So in our country, they do this thing where they want to fucking basically just deport a bunch of people who've lived here for years. But weren't necessarily born in this country.
Yeah, real quick, there was a thing called the Windrush scandal because a boat called the HMS Windrush brought a lot of people from the Caribbean into the UK when it was still an empire, and those people, many of them don't have documents evidencing whatever, but they've lived here for 70 years, and they're being just shoved back into a country that they've never meaningfully engaged with, don't speak a language, don't have a cultural connection to, and they're just deporting these people who've been in the country for 70 years. That's
what it's part of. It's part and parcel of those horrific punishments. It's a punishment basically if you've not been born in this country but lived here for years and years. It's okay, well, you had a bit of weed in your sock, back to Jamaica, right? Basically.
We had back in the day we had that over here with a lot of people from different Pacific islands or whatever that they put them overstayers and all this kind of stuff, and it got to the police doing what they call dawn raids, kicking down doors and just dragging people out and deporting them immediately or whatever. There was eventually an amnesty, but it was horrific, and there was so many people that had come over for work and stuff, people that had been paying taxes for decades or whatever, even despite not being proper citizens. Even stuff there was people that were the descendants of people that were brought over here blackbirded as slaves and stuff, and it's just then getting the door kicked in and taken back to Tonga where they've never been and they don't know anyone there and don't speak the language and stuff. But
so the bill that I was talking about, Shafiq, my mod, actually correctly said in the chat, it affects second generation immigrants now. So people who've been born here.
It's fully evil.
And all these kinds of laws were literally at the behest of these lads.
The Lords, the Lords get to choose.
Either bought their way in there or been born into it. And also bishops is a thing apparently in the House of Lords. It's bishops. If you're a bishop, you get to sit in on the House of Lords. So
of course.
Nuts.
But only a bishop within the Christian kind of church thing.
Oh yeah,
right?
of course, yeah.
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 They're not letting in, like,
I don't know if there's an Islamic version of a bishop, but they're absolutely not allowed to say it.
There's like different like denominations. There's like Jamaican churches. That,
we haven't changed. I mean, we don't have the separation of church and state. We just fully. I mean, the Queen is the head of our parliament, and like, it's absolutely
the royal family chosen by God too. Right?
Yeah, it's very cool. It's a very cool situation.
Yeah.
What were we talking about? Or
yeah. Non-reformist reform.
I'm just gonna jump up for a minute.
Right. Yeah. Sure.
All right.
Yeah. It's just like we are. So if you use the criteria like, do the elites oppose it? It's like we right now are like literally better off if the elites are on our side. Like the most definitional elites, lords. Like we need the lords on our side to protect democracy right now. It's kind of a weird situation we're in.
Yeah, so that definition does not work for non-reformists.
I've never been a follow the royal family person. I just knew enough to know that it was a thing, but I also knew enough to know that it was like a symbolic thing, right?
Yeah.
That there wasn't really a monarchy.
Yeah.
But there's clearly a aristocracy.
Absolutely, yeah, 100%.
Which is wild.
Which, to be fair, I would say there absolutely is an aristocracy in America. Like the families who've been going on the longest and have the most money, absolutely. But like, it's so much more explicit. Like they vote on our laws. Like,
rather than just like lobbying the government. Yeah.
Wild. Yeah, I was gonna say that's like, you were saying about not lowering the bar, but like not getting bogged down with things that don't necessarily actually matter that much.
So
right?
It was like two areas of thought. It's one, like it's one step at a time, and I know, like, again, hinging on the quote I put in the chat, which is, do not let my 40-year-old cis hetero invested in benefiting from the status quo thought supersedes your desire to throw bricks, if that's how you feel, right?
Or to give water bottles to homeless people.
Or to give water bottles.
Because we, Unread Planet, do not
We don't advocate for any of that
illegal activity
at
all. We just think that it's inevitable that people are going to engage in it because of how the state has let us down.
It's so inevitable that it's already happening.
Inevitable would imply it's in the future. You're right. No.
Can I read Tesserac's comment? So they say that so Commons writes the laws, the Lords pass them through, and the bishops can only move diagonally.
That's fun.
Sorry to cut everyone off with that.
Go on, FD. What were you saying?
And that was very worth it. So there's that, right? That bar that we're trying to cross first before we figure out what the next step is.
Yeah.
But in conjunction with that, I really think there's a big need for us to find ways to dismantle the hold of conservative thought and fascist thought on the general population, and to kind of help them connect the dots between their innate communist belief systems and the actual policies they support and engage in that harm them. It's, the wildest shit is these people that are, on their deathbeds talking about, I still wouldn't get the vaccine. Like, it's not a LARP. Like we
had a little bit of a joke about one of those earlier because there was this famous neo-Nazi and he just died, which was funny. But other than that, like, it's very sad. Like, people rejecting stuff that would be for their very immediate best interest, like a vaccine.
Well, I think this aligns with what we say on our show, because the idea of what we set out to do is create a space away from those kind of politics that you were saying that Anansi was talking about in their video, right? Where it's just like, we're just dunking on people and we're not actually getting anything done. Like, this is the whole, this is what we want to do. And in the sort of stuff that we're advocating for our audience to do, like go out, join unions, get involved in mutual aid networks, they are eventually going to come across some people who are of these conservative reactionary thoughts, because, like you said, a lot of these people are voting against their best interests. They're working class people, they're conservative. And so eventually a mutual aid network is going to help a conservative not die or like, you know, not starve, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah, no,
and then
for real,
eventually they will be like,
but...
now wait, because obviously, like, you say that straight away, just having come back from whatever you're doing, but like, in theory, when that conservative goes, holy shit, like all that shit that I've been taught about these crusty anarchists who are like helping me, and you know, giving me free medicine and stuff like that, it was all wrong. So we're, in terms of like taking those ideas out of people's heads, I think personally that is way better than
helping people is the best way.
It has to be. It has to be, right? Well, it has to come from a place of humanity.
I think that deprogramming all the programming that people receive from the media is a tricky thing, and it depends on the person. Yeah. And so I brought up my girlfriend's dad already. He's a very different kind of media consumer to, for example, my mom, right? My mom is middle class. She's an academic. I honestly think even if she saw this clip, she wouldn't mind me saying she's a little bit of an intellectual snob. She does like to feel she's smarter than people, and which she is. She's an academic. She's smart as hell. My mom's smart as hell. Just shout out to my mom. But she like does like to hear that there's kind of other areas of research that have already been done and thought into things, right? And the other day she was saying that like people who went to private schools shouldn't be allowed to run the country, and this is my new tactic with her, right? Is when she's saying something, I just put a label on it so that she can like maybe go and research if she's interested. So she's like, people who went to private schools shouldn't be allowed to run the country. And I go, Simon, what you're complaining about right now is called the dictatorship of the bourgeoisie. And what you're advocating for is called the dictatorship of the proletariat. Now that's not entirely true, but I was being cheeky, but like, but she's like, oh, that's interesting. Right? Like, I'm like, Marx kind of wrote about this, and she's like, oh, you know?
Yeah.
But by contrast, Mule and I over the weekend were watching. I was
just about to say this.
Yeah, by contrast, Mule and I over the weekend, we watched. This is a horrifying insight into what fun lives the Red Planet hosts have. But we sat around together, really baked, and watched Joe Rogan interviewing Jordan Peterson. And we were saying how
could you?
Like,
it's so
these guys. Like, if they heard that's actually a thing already, the idea you're saying is already a thing, and you can look it up and it's got this name, they would hate it, right?
Yeah.
And it's like that branding, like so many, especially, I mean, this is not to get super into the gender dynamics, but this is especially an issue with dudes, right? Is if they didn't invent it themselves, it doesn't count. Yeah. And if it was invented by something they heard is bad already, especially is terrible. But by contrast, like, you know, there are different kinds of people, and that's a kind of very person to person thing. Yeah, Refty, you were going to say something and I cut you off before.
I don't know, but I have something else I was going to say. I'm going to say.
Go ahead, yeah.
So many elements of this is tied to identity. It was you guys remember Adam Ruins Everything?
Yeah.
That was, and he had one episode that I thought was really good where he talked about how their show was genuinely ineffective because Dunning-Kruger effect and some other big word for people will double down on their fuckery when challenged on it, no matter how much.
Backlash effect, I think, or something like that.
Backlash effect, yes, I think that was it. If that ideology is tied to an identity.
Yes.
And
backfire
that
effect.
is
There it is. Backfire.
The big challenge. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely.
And like something, so like I honestly covered this briefly, but like a big thing about our current state of affairs in the States is Jimmy Carter becomes president in whatever year that was. He's the first Democrat to become a president in like 20 years or some shit. It's a long time. And Jimmy Carter is as socialist as a president has been in America up until, since.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah.
Right? And then the backlash to that was pretty handily handled. Clinton comes and gives us neoliberalism, which, everybody was, Bush and Reagan were doing it too, but Clinton gave it a liberal flavor, a progressive flavor to it. You know what I'm saying? He had his educated wife next to him that was a part. It was lots of all the pieces that we know now that we didn't know at the time that kind of have us where we are. But the backlash they don't talk about is that when Clinton came into power and really killed the Republican Party at the time by basically using their own political rhetoric, but also black people and women. You know what I'm saying? That's basically what they did. They said still police state, still neoliberalism, but also black people and women. They signed NAFTA, and here's where the trick happens. Newt Gingrich and all these like hyper-conservative, essentially fascist entities, they buy all these radio stations in the states, in Middle America, in states like Ohio and Pennsylvania, where these jobs were being, outsourced because of NAFTA, and they spread the propaganda for literally 20 years. Literally 20 years unchecked of propagandizing this entire population of Americans who were the people that gave Trump the election in 2016.
Totally.
Because even though Hillary Clinton had never, Hillary Clinton's awful, right? Still take over Trump. And she had never actually had a Senate seat in New York. But like these people who had never been governed by Hillary Clinton hated her so much because she was the face of NAFTA to them based on this radio talk, this conservative talk radio, your Rush Limbaugh's, right. Michael Medved, etc.
Yeah.
And now it's Ben Shapiro. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, totally. Oh, totally. Yeah.
Yeah. So
yeah. Well, I mean, it's an interesting thing because we're talking about like the brands that policies come through under, right? We talked about, do you like the Affordable Care Act? Yeah, I love it. Do you like Obamacare? No, right? No, it's communism or whatever, right? And it's those radio hosts play a big part in what people are taking to calling weaponized unreality. Like there's this second reality you have to live in to be a GOP voter increasingly in the 21st century. And those radio hosts were the beginning of it, where they realized that the best ways to get like loads and loads and loads of listeners was to just keep on lying, like just keep going about how absurd and how extreme all the evils of the Democrats were, and like it, it takes
eating babies now.
Oh, yes, exactly.
And then you look at Alex Jones, and it's just like...
You get to the Alex Jones.
Adrenochrome. There's so much adrenochrome. Vampires.
Yeah.
Little goblin guys.
The Chinese factories are producing baby parts that are selling to the Democrats so they can take the adrenochrome out and they can feed them to the voters. And then
the voters get the vaccine.
Juice. You don't realize, but vaccine is 99% baby parts. Yeah, exactly. And it's like you have to live in that reality to support the GOP now, right? And so backstory is that I've been doing research into conspiracy theories. I've always been interested in them, but now I've been reading the academic literature on why people believe conspiracy theories for the last year or so for a big project I'm working on, and out in March, by the way, if people are interested. It's very much that, right? Living in a completely different reality. And when we were watching Joe Rogan and Jordan Peterson, the two of them were talking about ways to protect the environment and ways to change things that would be better for people, and ways that they think the left, but they mean Hillary Clinton, they don't really mean the left, don't care about the working class. And Mule and I were looking at each other and we're like, he's advocating socialism? What the fuck? He started advocating protected coastlines and fish and helping fish come back and shit.
It's a beautiful moment where Joe Rogan is literally talking about, I can't remember specifically what it is, but it's unmistakably socialist, and then immediately makes a joke about, hey, all these communists on Twitter, they do communism on their iPhones, literally.
He goes what the fuck is
Checkmate.
It? It's something about universal. It might even be universal income. He is saying that. He goes that would be good. iPhone Vuvuzela, 100 million dead, Karl Marx, blah blah blah, and it's what the fuck just happened?
So they love communism, but not under the branding of it's socialism, it's communism, stuff like that, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's you see these dudes having conversations with with Bernie or with Dr. Cornel West and stuff, and it's they agree with what they're saying, when they're actually talking to someone, who is talking about these things or whatever.
When Bernie got to the town hall, his numbers shot through the roof. Give the man a chance to explain his policies in just common sense language. People love them.
Yeah. But it's like, when Joe Rogan and Jordan Peterson and stuff, when they're talking about like, lefties and communists and stuff like that, it's like the ultimate, like, just making a guy up to get mad at. Right? It's like
the straw feminists, the straw black nationalists.
Oh yeah. Oh, it's kind of a funny thing because, like, in the conversation, Jordan Peterson was saying leftist, and he, like I say, he meant Hillary Clinton, which, like, I hope no one here is under the illusion that Hillary Clinton is a leftist. And then, but then Joe Rogan was talking about leftists and seems to know who leftists are. So they were at this weird cross purposes where Jordan Peterson keeps on being like, the leftists don't even care about the working class. They'll pass these policies which will do all of these things. And Joe Rogan's like, no, I think leftists do. What do you want?
Yeah, he was really. It was so funny. He was correcting him.
Voice sound like that? Can I just put that out there? I avoided actually listening to him for years because I had read quotes. Right.
Jordan Peterson actually sounds like Kermit the Frog.
And I was like, this is the dude.
I think he's changing his voice though. Like, if you listen to him now, it seems like he's actually like maybe he's got some like voice coach or something, and he's trying to tone it down. And I wonder if it's like, because he was actually getting, ridiculed for it or whatever like that.
Like, why doesn't he change his ideas? That's what people are making fun of him for.
Right.
Like, ideas he should change.
Yeah, he's also had to have that voice training because every single time he talks about something with like a tiny bit of emotion, he just cries now. And he's not allowed. He's not allowed to show his audience that men cry.
Claims to hate trans women. Does voice training anyway.
I was gonna say.
I know. I was gonna say.
I always say Jordan Peterson's voice is Kermit the Frog. If Kermit the Frog had to deliver Kylo Ren's lines from Star Wars,
absolutely.
Like, that's the internet. It's like, I know what I have to do, but I don't know if I have the strength to do it.
Yeah.
You wish Han Solo was your father. Believe me, he would have been a disappointment.
All right, so one thing I want to bring up, going back to this conversation that I had with Alki, is the other thing we have to worry about, or really not even worry about, the thing that I think is fucking us over, because I've thought about a lot, like my growth and position suddenly as a person on the online left, because I didn't start out seeking to penetrate this space, right? I wanted to just talk about black movies and make jokes and be like, I wanted to very much be a Lindsay Ellis. Lindsay Ellis was my biggest inspiration. I think that came across in the Break Bread video. And Lindsay Ellis, although obviously left leaning, is not. I don't know her politics. Let me not even get into that because I don't know who is going to do something after the fact. Let me just stop there. What I'm saying is, when I made this Bo Burnham video and seasoned it with critical race theory, I suddenly became a YouTuber. And I suddenly saw like my AdSense check for the month, and I was like, "Oh shit!" Now I'm uncomfortable. You know what I'm saying? And like now just for the sake of my own moral compass, I need to force some type of like message out that is going to require a certain level of dissonance to be broken if you're going to watch my videos. So the first thing I talk about, the first video after Bo Burnham, the first thing I talk about is the riots in the East St. Louis race riots, which were at their core a labor dispute. And I say all this to say that the thing I've been talking to a lot of my peers about is being co-opted as a leftist entertainer, which is what I am. I'm very clear about that. And so many entertainers are leftist entertainers, and it has the unintended effect of providing blueprints for neoliberalism to do what Achille told me is called recuperation of leftist and radical ideas. So it goes from being abolish the police to reform the police, right? Black Lives Matter stops being a principle and becomes a brand and a flag you can buy for your house to virtue signal.
Have you seen the episode of Black Mirror with the guy who holds the piece of glass to his neck?
Yeah.
And then he becomes a show? That's recuperation. But chat, if you don't know, right, the episode where the guy holds the glass to his neck and then he gets a show doing the same thing, that's recuperation.
Yeah. I stopped watching Black Mirror after the episode. I was like, I can't. I'm not watching a single episode after that one. But yeah, and so that's the thing that becomes the paradox of like, that first rung. Is do we go in radical as fuck, minimize our capacity to make progress, but maintain the principles of the policy and the goal, or do we offer a lob up, a alley-oop to the system and say, hey, do this, call whatever the fuck you want, but, you know, trans rights, immigrant healthcare, you know what I'm saying, et cetera.
Yeah.
And, you know, and the thing I always point out is that a lot of the work I did, which was within the what the hell is Tiana's YouTube name? Fab Socialism has a great video she just released a couple weeks ago on the nonprofit industrial complex. So I did a lot of nonprofit work.
Yeah.
So that still serves the system, but it also provided like food and clothes. And in my case, like rescuing girls in sex trafficking. They don't care if I'm a leftist. You know what I'm saying? And so like it becomes this conundrum that I feel like we aren't engaged enough with as we talk about our ideas and our views for the future. There's so many details and nuances that are, I don't want to say they're missing, but they're underdeveloped in the discourse.
FD, I think you're in the right fucking place, man. Like,
yeah, you really are. You really are.
So Red Planet, okay. Firstly, the reason we're doing this show is that people aren't providing the education that people need to help each other and survive and feed each other and protect one another as capitalism is falling apart. Like, very clearly, we look around us, the hospitals are full, the supply chain is failing, shit's falling apart. But we need to take care of each other. And that's what the show is for. Like, we literally here, like, what can we actually do? And there's that radical side you're talking about, right? Where we are very explicit about what we think is going to happen from here on out. But, like you say, we need to know where to do electoralism. And that's why we're doing this episode today, right? Non-reformist reforms is how you can figure out what is worth your while. Like, when is it actually worth it at all bothering with electoral politics? And basically, you know, unless as a voter, I suppose, right, it's pretty simple. If the non-reformist reforms are on the table, you can vote for them. But I guess, you know, it sounds like you have this experience of it being incredibly frustrating on the inside of like the reform world, trying to get it to be, trying to get things to be as toothless as possible so that someone will actually, not read it, like you said. Yeah.
There's so many leftists. Almost everybody I worked with was a leftist.
Yeah.
You know, almost everybody.
People who care. Absolutely. Yeah. The system works with people who care, but it doesn't care that they care because it doesn't work for them. It's just using their labor to get what it needs to get done. Right. I hope also, like, I've brought this up a few times, but I'm writing this thing called Cyberpunk 2022, a direction for the online left, which hopefully we get before the end of the year. Otherwise, I'm going to change the name to Cyberpunk 2023. But one thing I'm going to talk about a lot in there is the distinction between organizing and left culture, right? And I think what you were describing just then is really pertinent to that conversation, because left culture, like, is good. It is unequivocally a good thing if loads of people log onto YouTube every day to check out the new FD Signifier video because they want to engage with the world as a leftist, right? And so that's the way where entertainment is not just, you know, just entertainment, so to speak.
Right.
But as you say, it can easily be co-opted. It can easily just be, you know, people can be entertaining while appealing to leftist ideas, but like, what are they actually doing? Even if they're a leftist who means it and is sincere, what are they even doing then? Like, even before the recuperation, even before someone comes in and they're the FD Signifier imitator, right? You're imitating Lindsay Ellis, and then they're imitating you, but they are way more to the center, or they're even a little bit right wing, and they're trying to do the same thing, but they're pushing other ideas, right? But even before that, your content, like, what does it do? Right. And that's where I'm making this distinction. And this is not to attack you. Like, what does my content do? But like, no. but that's all left culture. And then we have to like look at where we can actually be trying to shape like the world that we want with our content, like actually doing something that actually has an impact in the world. Like, that's why we have Red Planet, is because we want to have people learning really directly about how to change things. And we even give people homework every week, you know, to like go out and engage with things a little bit. The first week we told everyone to join a union. loads of our chatters did it, right? And not just workers unions, but also tenants unions. We've got people into tenants unions, shit like this. Like, this is what I mean. Like, you are on the money, and I was very pleased to hear you say all of that stuff, because like 100%. That is exactly what we're trying to plug into here.
Yeah.
Also, and I'll repeat this to everyone who might be interested, we would love if you copy us, folks. If you're in chat, and if you have any way around where you're like, I like Red Planet, but it could be better, do it. Just do it.
Yeah.
We absolutely want as many people as possible to be like providing this stuff and like organizing in this way, and also working together, like, you know, having FD-Sig and we had Thought Slime, Luna Oi, like having people on, and we had a Nancy last week. Having people on is a huge part of it, because we want to build like a system together, an ecosystem where we're all, you know, the shared audience is there and they care about doing something. I made a joke earlier in chat, which was like, Theory Tube is dead, long live Praxis Tube.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
I love it.
But let's get back to the main topic of the day. Practice is very cool, but sometimes policies can be worthwhile. That's the main topic today.
Yes.
Yeah, cool.
Maybe we should see if chat has any questions for us, because I know they've been asking a bunch.
That's a nice idea.
Yeah.
What did we got? Let's have a look through.
Yeah, I can't see the chat. I'm still looking at us in Discord. Where should I be?
I'll link you a thing. Hold up. Yeah, I'll link you it.
Yeah.
Chat, hit us with any.
Sophie, are you doing it?
I'm just gonna have a look through some of the comments while people are coming up with questions. But B-Rat's talking about getting sold the aesthetic of resisting the system without actually resisting the system, which I think is a good thing. Like, that's another, you know, like that's another thing from capitalist realism, right? Like, you're watching all the lefty content, so you feel like you're like, yeah, I'm a leftist because I consume the lefty content, as opposed to like actually going out and doing things, you know, like in the community or whatever.
That's so funny. I was talking to Nicole about this literally just earlier. Yeah,
like the idea of like the you know, like the consumer identity of the leftist or whatever, versus like, you know, the person that is actually kind of working to achieve leftist goals or whatever.
Right. Yeah. So, and another thing I'd add to that whole discussion is that there is like there are limits to what a content creator can do, because for instance, to reiterate, we don't condone anything illegal on this show, because that would be against terms of service. Right. But also, like, in a way more extreme case, right, there was an anarchist recently in the UK who was arrested for a bunch of reasons. Like, the dude was very radical and involved with lots of groups. I'm not saying that it's right for him to get arrested. I'm just saying that, like, he was much more serious and engaged than, say, me. But like, one thing that they charged him with was making a video which taught people how to make a bomb, right? And it's like, so going back to FD's, like, throwing a brick at a cop car, like, you know, there is a hard limit where a content creator who wants to stay on a mainstream platform cannot tell you, here's how you make a bomb, or here's how to, you know, go and throw a brick at a cop car, some shit like that. Like, we can't.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like, I think I think that there's like a responsibility with that when anyone is kind of like antagonizing or like anyone who's kind of hyping people up to do things like that. I was really careful with this when I was doing my video that we talked about the other week about, you know, like what to do in a riot and all this kind of stuff, where I think like you could put something in a video and you could be like, here is a responsible and reasonable situation where it might be justified for you to use force or something like that.
Right.
And then, you know, you can get people that'll watch it and just get real hyped up and they're like, damn, I can't wait to go use some force. You know, like, you know, like that. Like,
yeah.
You know,
and that's the other thing.
You go for it.
That's another thing I think about a lot. I'm sorry, I like clicked away. Where are we at? This is weird talking. I can't see anybody in a timely fashion, but I'm just finished my thought. It's just a meme with me and technology at this point. All right, I'm back with it. And that's another thing I try to be responsible with in terms of like how much you promote ideas that you are not involved. Your skin is not in that game.
Oh yeah.
You know, I never forget when this is before 2020. This might have been in Baltimore, when there was a protest that had broken out into violence, and I had like friends in my PhD program like, yeah, and I'm like, dude, you're here. It's like, I get your sentiment, but you're here.
Exactly.
You're not there. And like, you need to be reflexive of the fact that if you were there, you would still fucking be here. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And like, so put it in perspective, Rayshard Brooks in Atlanta, that is not far from where I live. And I saw that movement that burned down that Wendy's, like, begin to spread around, and it served a sense of cognitive dissonance and the paradox in my head, which is like, okay, it's getting rowdy. What do I protect, or do I, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. No, totally. Yeah. I mean, this is the thing. We try to highlight big wins on the show, and we're not highlighting. We're not saying like violence as a win, because it's not like we don't want people being violent. This is why like the big wins is always us being like, look at these people, they worked together to do something nice and take care of one another. Like
that's it. When you said earlier about like being careful about using the word revolution, that was like, oh yeah, well we say the word revolution, but when we say the word revolution, we mean like dual power structures, right? Like I said earlier, like mutual aid networks, unions, all coming together to basically make government redundant, right? So we don't need to rely on it anymore. Yeah, that's our whole shit.
There was just a similar thing to what FD was saying. Like at Martel, there was it was largely like, it was a peaceful resistance, kind of like a land occupation, and there were literally people showing up, like, like people that were like, I guess like well-meaning white people that weren't, like they didn't have any skin in the game, that were showing up like, hell yeah, we can't wait to like fight the cops and everything like that. And it's kind of like, okay, like, like if shit does get real, obviously people are going to have to put their bodies on the line. And that is like, for an ally, that is, like that's cool that you're willing to go there and stuff, but it's Maori that have to live with that violence and like the effects of that down the track, and any police retaliation. Like, I know people that have like literally been put in jail for their association with protest movements where other people have instigated things, and then they'll just go arrest a bunch, and they don't arrest like the dudes that drove down from like the North Shore of Auckland or whatever like that. They go arrest the guys out like living in the bush and stuff. It's
exactly.
So it's like, that's another thing definitely to keep in mind as like an ally. Sorry, that's away from the
no, that's great. That's great. We got a big question here. So Crimson Tinted in chat said, FD referred to having Google Scholar access earlier for research materials. I've always wondered how much the privatization of educational and scholarly content has precluded well-meaning leftists from having the knowledge base needed to resist the appealing aesthetics of non-reformist reform. How do you see rebuilding that base outside of privatization turning out? How can we facilitate this and tie this to material outcomes for people? So I think I think, if I'm understanding the question correctly, what could we change to make it so that there isn't like that gatekeeping of knowledge, right? Is that a fair?
That's what I read from it. So
I think it's this. Okay. Like, I think, and like one of the things I've been super intentional about is like putting out the idea that this type of stuff, content creation, is super important and valuable and revolutionary, even if it's a dumb YouTube video and I use memes in the middle of it, because I am a PhD student, or I'm about to be a former PhD student, because I'm like, I don't feel like finishing the shit. And I'm a PhD student because of X amount of benefits and privileges that led to that result, not so much my own choices. It's because I had an opportunity structure and enough wins that led me to that point. And that's by design. And academia is trash, and it's full of gatekeeping and just like the research industrial complex and shit. And so for people who have had, you know, Nicole said, and we chatted earlier that she was in the PhD program, and ContraPoints is in the PhD program. Like, we need all these motherfuckers to hit YouTube. And, you know, we're not going to give you the best stuff. We're not going to give you academic rigor, but we're going to give those ideas and like provide those papers. You know what I'm saying? And that is, and then that creates a cultural zeitgeist. So that when I look at my content and I see that, you know, 30% of my viewers are under 25, I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what I want, because those are going to be formative experiences of media for those youth, because we need that, because that affects the decisions we make.
I love that. That's so good. In chat, there's actually a question directly for FD. So Jamison89 asks, question for FD, but I'm sure everyone here can relate as a content creator. You mentioned earlier you are on your wife's healthcare after becoming a full-time YouTuber. Do you think that gave you some pause having to be tied to her employment? How many FD signifiers are we missing out on because they're afraid to lose their insurance?
So it's not just insurance. Like, we're missing out on, especially when we talk about, you know, minority marginalized voices, BIPOC people specifically, and Black people explicitly. The same barriers that affect everything with Black folks affects our ability to be on YouTube and talk our shit. And I talked about this a lot in Break Bread, which is one of the reasons why like Break Bread happened, because I was deciding that I was going to go a more explicitly leftist lane, not like, more left than I was planning, right? And then I because I'm like, I'm doing this for real. Like, I've done a lot of research on the YouTube game, and then joining Nebula, you get access to the power structure to learn certain things. And so when I started reading like the tea leaves, I was like, oh, this is fucked. And I started like researching dead channels of Black, leftists, content creators, and finding all these small channels, finding an Anansi, finding a St. Andrew, etc., and saying, man, these people are like doing powerful, important content. And I've been on the platform since 2006, and I've watched ContraPoints, I've watched Philosophy Tube. Fucking Sophie, quick funny story. Break Bread dropped,
no, don't shame me. No, don't do this to me.
After Break Bread dropped, I was like, I always search for who's talking shit, good and bad. And I found DJ Mule.
I wasn't talking shit. I want to be clear about that.
No. I wasn't talking shit.
I want to preempt this before anyone thinks I was talking shit. I wasn't.
Long story short, Sophie was like in the chat of DJ Mule's live and was like, how the hell did John the Duncan get mentioned before I did? And the funny thing is, I had been watching Sophie's content for about a year at that point. I was explicitly wanting to talk about white dudes, so like I left you out. I'm sorry.
Shout out John the Duncan, by the way.
But it's interesting because actually, as well as that, in DJ Mule's chat that day, I was saying how trans people go through exactly the same dynamics unless we are explicitly talking about trans stuff. Like ContraPoints is a great example where she's made tons of like hour-long videos about like, here's what I reckon gender is, to try and explain to cis people or whatever. And it's like, not every trans person wants to fucking do that. Like, in the same way, like, FD, you wanted to just talk about some movies, right? And, until you talked about Black politics and about the exclusion of Black people from this space, right? Like, well, sorry, you said the Bo Burnham was the big one, right? But like,
it was still Bo Burnham with the critical race theory,
Exactly.
season.
And in the same way, like, I've wanted to talk about TERF several times, and I keep on putting the project back because I'm just like, I just don't want to have a video go big just because I'm a trans person talking about trans stuff. I want people to respect my actual, like, my ideas on their own grounds, not just because I'm this voice on this thing,
Right.
And then we talked about the intersection of that with Anansi, who, also, is a friend of both of us. Yeah.
Yeah. And the algorithm and YouTube as a platform isn't set up to do that. It's set up to serve the audience, which basically means to serve the status quo.
Yes.
Which means trans people talk about trans stuff, black people talk about black stuff.
Yes.
So on and so forth. And every once in a while, I want to sneak through the filter, and here I am.
Yeah.
And it's really like fucks with me on a daily basis.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't just the healthcare. It's the fact that I got a little Biden money, bought a computer. I had a couple of homeboys that were doing, style blogs and shit. It's like, yeah, just film it on your phone. And then, I was good at X, Y, and Z things enough to make a side hustle out of YouTube that had I not done the Bo Burnham video and, to give myself some credit, been pretty good at like doing the video essay thing, I wouldn't be here. And there's so many dudes like me, which is why I always keep coming back to the well, like, check this channel out, because the platform, you cannot get on YouTube without certain privileges. Even if it's not just a decent mic, which I still don't even know how to fucking use half the time. That's the answer to that question.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I use the share function on people's videos all the time. I think I did that literally with Break Bread. Like I want to get my audience seeing other stuff outside of just what we're like, outside of what they're recommended, because like they don't even get recommended stuff that like from channels they're subscribed to. And at the nice intersection of that and something we were talking about earlier, I wanted to mention organizing interviews, which I already mentioned earlier, but this is another kind of content that I think people could whatever easily copy. It doesn't run afoul of terms of service, and it could genuinely make a huge impact to the real world. I've been doing this thing for the last year where I get in touch with activists and organizers, and then I just have a Zoom call with them for an hour where I ask them about like what they do. How can other people get involved? How can people do their own thing if they're too far away to get involved with your org directly? This stuff. And now I'm publishing them. And like, so the first thing to revisit this, none of my subscribers are seeing it, right? I have nearly 100K subscribers now. It is the lowest ranked of all the last 10 releases I've made. Every time I release a new one, no one is seeing it. Whenever I ask, even my patrons, right? I'll be talking to someone who I more or less know as a friend, and they're just like, "Oh, I just didn't see it. Like, I just didn't. It wasn't on my page at all." Like, it gets flattened. But the thing is, I think if like there was more content out there like it, the algorithm would respond more to it, and we'd make more of a space. So like that's one thing. I would genuinely want more people to do that shit because it would make a difference. But it also fits into what we were talking about before with like, when can content actually make a difference? Right? And I think this could be an interesting one, right? Because I've tried to focus on people on the ground. I've tried to focus on people who are doing a thing directly through organizing and through mutual aid. But to bring it back to the topic of today, right? We could do more to focus on non-reformist reforms. Like, one place where we could use our content for some good is we could really focus hard on specific policies that have a chance of, have a chance of passing at all, that are non-reformist reforms, and we go pay attention and get involved with this and tell your representative that you want them to sign off on it, or tell them tell them to back it, or tell them that you won't vote for them again if they don't back it, or shit like this. Like, this would be like kind of actually mobilizing people to make serious changes. Empire28 says, are they on a specific day of the week? I'm intentionally seeking a new content out. Every Friday, the best day of the week to release YouTube videos. That's funny, isn't it? You still can't seem to find it even on on a Friday.
Yeah. That's weird. My best day is Monday.
Really? That's bizarre. Okay. That's bizarre to me. But yeah, no,
the time zone thing or what?
Yeah. Who knows?
Maybe.
But yeah,
I think my audience started with, like people my age who are like fucking off at work maybe on a Monday. But like Monday is my
Well, Monday will be really good for me streaming for that reason. But if I'm releasing a video, people seem to love to like go watch my videos on a weekend, and I'm like, guys, get a life.
For sure.
Oh shit.
But yeah, that's another way that we could be doing more, is I think like getting people plugged into non-reformist reforms.
And it's just kind of to amplify what Sophie's saying here. We have, at least from what I'm told, so I've had, in doing Break Bread and connecting to Nebula and maneuvering these, establishment networks, I've had chances to have conversations with people that should know and should be able to say, X equals X, Y equals Y about the algorithm of YouTube, etc. So they tell me that we can manipulate the algorithm through networking, through sharing each other's videos. It won't have you won't have like a perfect impact. Yeah. To point out, Khadijah and Bo shouted out, I think maybe 30 channels over the course of 2021.
Yeah.
And probably only 3 or 4 of them popped off. Me, Foreign Man, Intellectual Media, so on and so forth. So you kind of have to have, the talent, whatever. Yeah. But we're now all connected in the algorithm's eyes.
Yeah.
So 9 times out of 10, if you watch one of my videos, you're going to get suggested an Intellectual Media video.
Exactly.
And so if I put out there, go watch Anansi, or better off, because Anansi's like, I'm kind of over being a YouTube star. Like, but if I say go watch, St. Andrew or Sophie, then our channels connect. And now the algorithm's like, yo, I got this new big FD Signifier video. So you did that? All right, next up. Right. Here's Sophie. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? And so those things are important. So if you are subscribed to any one of our channels, you really have to do some of the work with us in keeping that network and even the algorithm's desire to promote our network strong.
Yeah.
It's basically what it comes down to. Because that's how Lindsay H-Bomb ContraPoints became the first wave left tube or whatever people are calling it.
Yeah. That's exactly it. This is what I mean when I say make an ecosystem. And this is also why, so I'm releasing a video next week, which is just like a summary of like all the political stuff I'm doing, like Red Planet, telling people what I'm up to. And one of the things I'm going to say in that video is just like, hey, even if you're not like, you don't think that organizing interviews sounds interesting, can you please go just give it just leave it on in the background or something and give it a like? Because like the more people who do that, the more YouTube will say, oh, Sophie's subscribers actually do want to see her videos. Yeah. So we'll show them to more people, like kind of thing. And I'd say the same thing to content creators would be to like, please share it through the share button. But like, in the same way, if more people are making content that's like organizing interviews, or maybe more people make stuff that's like Red Planet, there will naturally be that same shared audience, and you have the same effect. Exactly. Yeah. You make an ecosystem, and then YouTube or the algorithm knows, it doesn't know things really, but it knows there's a space and a potential for it to get lots of eyes on something. Yeah. Sorry, Tim.
That's, I was just going to say, Nat's just pointed out in the chat how important this like kind of creating an ecosystem is. And this is what the debate Twitch scene does and why it's so incentivized and toxic.
Yeah, because they're just going on each other's shows all the time.
Yeah. Like the cross-pollination sort of thing. And it's because that's part of their model, right? Debating each other and like all that kind of stuff. That's that's exactly why the algorithm kind of pushes that content, why a lot of those creators get so big so quick and stuff, just because it's it's like kind of a unique meeting of what the algorithm wants to kind of promote and their kind of business model, I guess.
And so, most debate streamers are also drama streamers, so as well as having everyone else in their show, when they're not doing that, they'll also just be like, oh, Bad Bunny said this thing, and then so people who then watch Bad Bunny, right, get recommended, oh, you'll love name redacted here, right?
Yes.
Like, you'll love this guy because he's talking about Bad Bunny. Yeah. Like it's a funny thing. Yeah, so go on.
Like I said before, I don't do it as much now as I've been, I don't want to say targeted, because that's not fair to people who've actually been targeted by these groups. But as I've become noticed by some of these entities in the debate streamer world, like when I search my name to see, like I search my name sometimes to find people who I want to promote, because like who's trying to get my attention, right?
Yeah.
I notice now it's full of clips from these debate streamers, and they're not saying anything about me. They're not in any way engaging with my content or what I'm talking about or me as a person. It's just, I don't know if they're just putting my name in their hashtags so that people that search for me find them. Or
that's exactly what it will be. Yeah, that's exactly what it will be.
Yeah, it's gross.
Yeah. 1,000%.
Yeah. Yes. But hey, how about non-reformist reforms? How are we talking about that?
Yeah.
It's funny because like all the stuff you've been saying, FD, is like exactly in line with what we want for the show. So I think we've all got a bit overexcited about talking about that. Yeah. But we should stick to the topic that we're actually meant to talk about today.
But blame the chat. The chat asks questions.
That's true. That's true. I do blame chat.
We're
very bad
in our integrity on this topic.
That's right.
But yeah. So I'm going to mention it again. I will definitely say it right at the end. But the homework this week is going to be for people who are interested in doing it. Again, homework's not mandatory, but like go and look at like the electoral politics around you, basically, right? That means what could be passed, what has been discussed before, and try and identify non-reformist reforms. Shit that would actually free people up to engage in class struggle. It would actually get people having a better life, having a freer life where they'd be able to go and help other people to also get free, right? And so maybe that's something we can discuss kind of for the rest of the time, like maybe chat with chat about it as well. Maybe chat also let us know if you're still not quite clear on what makes a non-reformist reform, but like maybe we want to chat about like our own local policy options and where that, if we can identify them. I don't know.
Yeah,
it's an idea.
It's really tough in the UK, for example, because two-party system and the main opposition at the minute is completely toothless, right? In all of their policies. In fact, I'd be hard pressed to actually name a Labour policy at the moment.
Integrity or something.
Integrity, normal.
No, that's austerity. It's something different.
Yeah,
authority, normal. Integrity, austerity. That's their motto.
Yeah, right. Exactly. It's so it's really hard. But there are other political parties in the UK other than the two-party system. So I guess I could like advocate a little bit for the Northern Independence Party. One of the main policies of the Northern Independence Party is that basically London-centric politics in this country increasingly deprive the north of England from all kinds of public services. Like every single aspect of public funding is dramatically lower than in London and in the home counties, right? So the Northern Independence Party is fundamentally like, right, well, essentially what we'll do is just basically demand in Parliament while they're working towards, getting elected. It's going to be tough. They're a real fringe party if they're going to actually get elected. But if they get MPs, it will be to put on the table things like, listen, we need more devolution in the north. We need more funding from Westminster, that kind of stuff. That kind of stuff would lift a lot of people in the north of England out of poverty. Yeah. Then if they're going to be lifted out of poverty, that obviously like gives people a bit more free time, right? The more money you have, the less time you need to spend working, et cetera, et cetera. I don't need to, tell chat why that's great, obviously, because then they can go and get involved in other aspects of great, obviously like things we spoke about, mutual aid networks, and go and help people do strike solidarity with like renters unions and stuff, right?
And this is another great example of like the difference between being invested in like the personality of a politician or a party versus the policies. Because I agree with everything Mule just said about the Northern Independence Party and their potential, but I also know a lot of people who have deep concerns about the Northern Independence Party's like trustworthiness, and like so I would absolutely co-sign everything Mule just said, and that doesn't mean I'm saying go like join the party, spend all of your time like door knocking for them and this shit, right? Because this conversation is all about how much of electoralism is worth your time, right? And I'm just gonna say like who the audiences we're speaking to right now, because like obviously some assumptions we're making rely on the idea that there are already a ton of people who are spending their time on electoral politics. Like FD was saying about working with so many leftists who do care about stuff and who are trying to change something for the better. And those people are there and they're still going to be there. And I'm not trying to talk those people out of being there, but I don't think those people are really listening to me anyway. Right. By contrast, if you're like looking for something, a way to get out in the real world and help people immediately, I'm like, don't go door knock for a party. Like, don't. Right. And then so when electoral politics is worth your while, if you're that kind of person, who I think is our audience, right, when it's worth your while is when there's a possibility of a non-reformist reform, and it's about policy, and it's not about believing in a party or a politician.
Yeah, like it sucks because there's no way that that's even going to get close to getting put through. Do you know what I mean? But it's an example of a policy that would absolutely benefit if it was run.
If it was possible, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Like if it was something that Keir Starmer tomorrow was like, I'm going to do that, it would be like, well, sucks. I got to vote for this guy. You know what I mean? So yeah.
Yeah, I vote, especially as a former I lost my my liberal card with Obama, and kind of like watching the way that played out. Like now I vote with the same like energy that I like put ketchup on fries versus barbecue sauce. You know, it doesn't like the thing I've always been kind of annoyed, and this may be just my boomer take, with like the energy people put into voting or not voting. It doesn't require that much energy unless you're like going to, knock on doors and fucking going to campaign trails and shit. Like never do that shit ever. Yeah. But like on the fucking, and then if you don't feel like voting because it just doesn't serve you in your spirit, then don't vote. And if you feel like voting, like it takes, it's where you live, it takes half a day or 30 minutes, and it's one day out the year. And it doesn't make a difference to much, but the handful of things it might make a difference to, something like HUD in the States. Trump gutted HUD. You know what I'm saying? That made a difference. Fucking abortion, the 3 Supreme Court justices kind of made a difference. What else? Would we have stopped the encroachment of neoliberal fascism in America with Hillary versus Trump? No. But Texas may still have an abortion laws, so I think we need to disengage. I think that's a really an example, at least here in the States, of how like bought into these systemic frameworks we are, that we really attach voting to our identity. I'm a vote or die, you know what I'm saying? Versus like, I don't give a fuck. I prefer barbecue sauce on my fries, but I'm not gonna eat fries most of the year.
Right.
I want to read Jameson's comment because it. Did you have anything else to say about that?
No, that was it.
Okay, great. So Jameson was big in the Bernie Sanders campaign. And he says that when I was knocking on doors for DSA on behalf of the Bernie campaign, we used to talk about non-reformist reforms to try and get them involved in our housing and homelessness subcommittee. To get people invested in local politics in LA. The campaign was the pretext to knock on doors, but the goal was to get them involved. So I wanted to read that because I think that sometimes, I don't know how I'm still trying to work out the kinks with my feelings on electoralism, like how much is like a waste and so on and so forth. But I don't really have any super strong feelings, so I'm not really gonna like give my personal takes on any of that. But I will say that I do think that knocking on doors for a politician, strictly for the politician, is maybe a different thing than knocking on doors because of the politician, but you're doing it also to get people involved in a bigger movement or to get them inspired to get involved in local politics and so on and so forth.
Yes. So that's all really, really interesting. However, Jamo, I'm going to roast you now because I just did an interview with Common Humanity Collective for organizing interviews, and it's actually coming out this Friday. And we don't talk about this exactly like totally in the interview, but if you watch my interview and you listen to the episode where they were interviewed on It Could Happen Here, you'll kind of get the full picture. And like those people like were involved with. Like one of the founders was like deeply involved with the Bernie campaign. Another one of the people I spoke to was super involved with DSA, and they found DSA super limiting, and just like they were desperate to just like help people and really, really help people. And DSA's process and frankly their politics and a whole bunch of shit just like wouldn't let them actually help people. And so I feel and I feel like they are a really clear case of exactly what I'm talking about, where like there are definitely people who are in the reform world, and I don't think a lot of them are kind of in my audience, right? Or in this audience. And by contrast, like if you're going out and knocking on doors, like if you've got that spirit, like a lot of people are going to want to go more directly to to the place where they're actually helping someone. So like CHC, for example, made masks to give out for free, and then they made air purifiers because they're in what's it called, the Bay Area, right? And so there's fires, so like this stuff.
Right, yeah.
You know, I feel like a lot of the time people who are kind of invested in helping people are gonna go way more directly for the helping people directly, right?
Okay, interesting.
It's just a counterpoint. I don't disagree like wholeheartedly. I was joking about roasting. Like I agree with the message, and then I wanted to add on, like, I feel like you're always gonna have people that are just frustrated and they just gotta like move past that stuff. Like like the DSA was the literal example, and it was people who worked on the Bernie campaign. So it was really interesting. Like those people are just like, this isn't enough. This is just isn't helping.
You know,
anybody.
but that's real and that's valuable, because that's a part of my conversion to the left myself is the Bernie evangelicals that I trusted. Another problem, Bernie, I did not have good experiences with Bernie bros. Soured me on them pretty much from jump. But I met enough over time that whatever word it is, where it was part of what pulled me into like engaging more and identifying more as a leftist. Was that experience. So if you do have a candidate that happens to sneak through the cracks, much like Bernie did, kind of, you know, shock, you know, Bernie, for any criticism that you might have of him, it was a paradigm shift in American politics. Where,
totally.
You know, openly socialist, you know, quasi-communist rhetoric and policies were being introduced into the mainstream. And that's, you know, recuperation and a lot of other things, but it also like reframed the discourse in the States and reframed the youth's engagement with politics and policy to a great extent. So like there's
he was bringing conversations in that just like you would never have expected to happen a couple years earlier, right? Like
totally,
somebody in Buffalo, New York, I think was elected on an explicitly socialist platform. There's like problems after the fact, but like that's a thing. You can look that up.
I want
just gonna pop to the toilet.
Okay. All right. I want to read Jameson's comment, just so we can make sure we have again. Doesn't feel like he can't say his part. He says to Sophie, "I'll have to give your video a watch. I would say my experience and what DSA does here could be wildly different. Did a whole squatting campaign tactic to get people housing, then fought the police when they were getting evicted at gunpoint. So that sounds pretty based." And this is the thing, like I can never take, I've never been involved with the DSA, but like I've heard a variety of things, and I think it's tough because the DSA there's so many chapters. There are always different people joining and leaving. Like it's hard to ever really get a coherent picture of like what it is, and maybe that's because there is no coherent picture of what it is, perhaps. I don't know.
I think it varies greatly from chapter to chapter for a lot. And from what I've seen from you know, people that I know over in the States and stuff. So it's quite hard to make a blanket statement.
There's a few things I want to reference now, which I usually try and give book recs whenever I can throughout the stream. I've got 2 book recommendations, and I've also got a quote which I'm trying to find. So sorry if I don't find this, but I'll carry on looking anyway. But basically, so the first book rec is "Searching for Socialism: The Project of the Labor New Left from Ben to Corbyn" by Leo Panich and Colin Lays. Nat got this for me; it's very good. And the other one, so that's very UK focused, obviously. The other one I think is called "Our Revolution," which is by Bernie Sanders, and I think that both of these give really good perspectives, which are from the point of view of non-reformist reforms. Like they are by people who are fully in the electoral world, but they are all about actually trying to help people with policy, like places where policy actually means something rather than just playing the endless circle jerk of politician nonsense, right? And the quote I'm trying to find, so if anybody in chat finds this faster, is Noam Chomsky describing Bernie's kind of legacy, even after the movement. Because this is an interesting thing. Actually, this might help people find it. There is a slightly altered version on the front of the Punished Bernie Ammon animations video. It's slightly altered because it talks about gamer rights instead. Anyway, Bernie's really interesting because it absolutely mobilized so many people, and then so many people became like really frustrated and want to go do other shit.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting when we talk about dual power, right? Because we're trying to talk about like a sense of continuity, but all these people feel like they've had a really chaotic journey. Yeah. And yet everyone's having that same journey. Like there's a huge number of people having the exact same journey where they go, I protested BLM, or I voted for Bernie, or I was at Occupy, or all three, and many other things. But it didn't go to the next level almost, right? Like Bernie didn't get in, or like they bailed out the banks, or they didn't defund the police, right? Kind of things. And they were like, so they're like, well, where do I go now? And then they find other stuff. And in CHC's example, like they're building a mutual aid network, which is fucking awesome. But it's kind of an interesting thing that like the place where like populism can actually help electoralism is so limited, right? Like there's the Bernie campaign, but then as soon as it's like they're not selecting Bernie, he becomes someone who's just like, you just have to trust in his judgment. Like, so this is what I wanted to read the quote for, and I will still try and go find it, but I guess it might become redundant now. Basically, Chomsky talks about the things that Bernie has done from within the administration now, because he's got a role to do with like, he might be secretary for economics something, I don't know, but he's got a position where he can actually make pretty meaningful policies, and all the best stuff from the Biden administration more or less is coming straight from him. Like, as much as there's any good shit coming from Biden's administration, it's coming directly from Bernie. And it's really interesting because it's like all the people who feel frustrated absolutely should, right? And all the people who feel let down absolutely should, and disillusioned with electoral politics, I also think absolutely should. But also on some level they achieved a huge part of their goal, because their guy did get into government and is helping people directly now. It's just that like you actually can't engage at this point with helping Bernie do his job because he's just in a job now, right? And it's kind of like if there was a culture of direct action that sometimes lent some energy to electoralism, that people would have a sense of continuity, right? Like, I think one dream I have for Red Planet is if by the next election cycle, the whole online left couldn't, like, we could have not the whole online left talk about the election, right? Yeah. Like, if Red Planet does well, right, then a good standard for success would be if we could maybe be a safe place for people who want to talk politics but don't want to just talk about the fucking election all the time, right? If we were here and we were like, people are doing these cool things and there have been these wins and these unions have gotten these things and blah blah blah, right? Then people could come here instead of just talking about harm reduction and the Democrats and why Hillary Clinton is evil and blah blah blah. And of course the Republican guy is evil. That's what they do. They put an evil guy in. But is it actually maybe better to vote for that guy than the neoliberal Democrat? No, it isn't. But anyway, let's like and on and on and on. And it's just like fucking. Can we talk about something else?
Escalated. Like, guys, I need to go put kids to bed with my wife.
Okay.
Things like that. This was awesome and cathartic and
yay!
But also like the opposite of doomerism.
That's good. That's what we're trying to do.
Absolutely the opposite of doomer.
Hell yeah!
2 weeks ago, we did Against the Black Pill with Thoughts Line. That was the topic of the week. It's a huge focus. We're trying to fight doomerism here.
Yes,
absolutely.
There's an algorithm loves it. But the algorithm.
But we're gonna make a space where people love not doomer hope, where people love hope. I forgot the word. I was like, what's not doomerism? What's the opposite of that?
Yeah. Right. That's what's that? That's like doomer realism, where you can't conceive from.
Anyways, let's get some claps in the chat. Bun clap or bun clap F if you're not a sub. Thank you, FD Signifier, for coming, staying with or joining us today. I really appreciated your input. I think I can speak for everyone. When Absolutely. I say that. And I don't know if you have time to quickly shout out your channel and where we can find you, or if you don't have time, we can do it for you, but Gotta sign
Yes,
in.
I am FD Signifier on YouTube. I think if you do it with or without the period, it's fine. Signifier is spelled properly, at least on YouTube. But it seems like I'll come up if you spell it any of the numerous ways that comes up. I'm releasing a video about Black love stuff and on Valentine's Day, and then probably I don't know if I'll take a break for Obama. And then I'm gonna talk about Obama and bare my soul, get cursed out by some friends and aunties, and then maybe get cursed out by some leftists at the same time because it's complicated. At least for me. We'll see. Yeah, be on the lookout. All right, y'all. Let me go. Love y'all.
All right, cool. We'll see you later.
See you later.
Right, chat. It's test time. It's time for the test.
Pop quiz.
Pop quiz. No. I'm surveying you. It's not a test. I genuinely want to know
so that
we can address the issue. Okay. Ones in chat, if you are confident you could identify a non-reformist reform policy, and zeros if you are not confident that you could identify one, because I think we should try and make some people go away from this and can actually do their homework, because the homework is going to be to go look at that stuff. Lots of ones. Oh,
few zeros.
Few little zeros. Okay. I think it might be worth us going over it again.
Let's go over it again. Yeah.
Right. Because we did derail for a long time also.
we did, yeah. Which is fair enough, right? So the definition that we all agreed was the best one was, is it Haria? I forgot her name. Walia?
Hasha Walia?
Yeah, right. And that person said, is it there? Do we have it? Oh my God. There we go. Has the tactic been effective in exposing or confronting a specific point within the system by either diminishing its moral legitimacy or undermining its functions?
Yes.
And I think, and that's great because Medicare for All does that, right?
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? Like the system is, we don't want you to have healthcare. We want you to suffer. We want you to pay unbearable amounts of money to it. And it completely undermines that system. It's done. So like another example that I brought up at the start of the stream that people might have missed was free broadband that Jeremy Corbyn brought in as a policy.
Or to go something way more basic about human needs, Corbyn and kind of people he's working with have been for a long time suggesting a national food service.
Yes.
So similar to the National Health Service, just anyone who's hungry, anyone get some food.
Yeah, that's a really cool one. Yeah.
Yeah, really.
But that's basic. That's basically it.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, yeah.
Well,
yeah.
We never got to the article that I wanted us all to get to, but I don't think we.
Do you want to read it?
I don't think we have time because we're already over time and everything. But I linked it in the chat throughout the stream for anyone else to read, because this is the thing that got me introduced to the topic, and what they defined as reformist reform is oh God, where is the definition that they used? Basically, it was
reformism is when your mission is to tinker with the system to make people's lives better, but not really alter the basic structure at the end of the day. And reformists prefer changes that give people a much needed helping hand, but don't really undermine capitalism. But there are other kinds of reforms that actually shift the balance of power in a dramatic way, even if they don't by themselves demolish all of capitalism. Is that the bit?
Perhaps, yeah. Oh yeah,
that's pretty based.
So there's this whole article is great. It has a lot of incredible gems in it. And I think it explains the concept from a multitude of different angles. Oh, here's a sentence. There are reforms that position us better to square off with capitalism.
Perfect.
I like this too, because I think there's a lot of different ways to describe non-reformist reforms, and here's the thing, there's a lot of benefits to them. So it's not going to be just one way that they help you square off better with capitalism, but one of the ways they do that is by exposing or confronting a specific point within the system, blah blah blah. So I think there's a lot of different ways you can talk about it. And I think that I think the exercise of just trying to think in this way is just that being the homework, I think, is really the goal. It's not did you correctly identify one? Great. Well, you're done. I think it's more of can your brain start working in this way? You know, can we start to can we, instead of like
Yeah.
thinking increase minimum wage, and then we just have trapped in this idea that we're always stuck here just begging. In fact, can we start to interact with this system in a way that helps to dismantle it? I think that's a good exercise.
Yeah. Sorry, I cut you off.
No, you're fine. You're good.
I've already forgotten what I wanted to say. Oh, right. Yeah. So we basically in this chat in this stream, we want to liberate our comrades. We want to liberate ourselves. We want to liberate our comrades, right?
Yeah.
So best way to look at this, I guess, is like, what's the best way that you can either liberate or potentially enable more people to help liberate our comrades through electoral policy?
Yes.
Right.
Right.
I want to read this also real quick. Jameson linked this to me earlier. I've talked about this a million times in my stream. It's this tweet I keep going back to. This is an excerpt from like a newspaper from a very long time ago in America. Unfortunately, not long enough, but a very long time ago, talking about how liberals were trying to reform slavery. So at the time when chattel slavery was active in America, there was like a group that was like, no, we love it. And then there was another group that goes like, okay, well, we can't just get rid of it. It's heartbreaking and it's, it makes you sad, but we can't just get rid of it. And so they try to reform it away. So I'm going to quickly read this because it really shows like the opposite of what we're talking about, of like that kind of like Libby reform, whatever we want to call it. So the Times list of slavery reforms included legalization of marriage, criminalization of the separation of husband and wife, Sunday instruction subject to efficient police regulation, ownership of property, and encouragement of savings. Slaves should be allowed to purchase their freedom if condoned by their state of residence. If a state did not want an emancipated slave to remain on its soil, the state could require that freedom be conditional on emigration to Liberia. The federal government could encourage these practices by offering to pay $25 per slave to each slaveholding state for an education and reform fund. The Times would allow slaves to be bought and sold as long as families remained intact, but slaves would still be subject to compulsory labor. The Times concluded, slavery thus modified and ameliorated will become a very tolerable system and would deserve the title of patriarchal, which its friends claim for it.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
A very tolerable system.
Yeah, very tolerable. This to me reads as the not reforms that positions people being enslaved as any closer to like gaining power or like, how do we use the descriptors we were using earlier? No, not
yeah. Well,
not that either.
yeah, like I love to say free people, right? And it's just like if you're in the class struggle, right? And there's all sorts of shit that's stopping you and your comrades from fighting in it. And I don't mean brick at a cop car. Obviously, we don't endorse illegal activity here on Red Planet, but fighting in it by freeing other people from it.
Yeah.
Right?
And just like your ability to engage with, I would say to engage with class war meaningfully, like, to like even just having the time or resources to go to, like to start organizing with other people and things like that. Doesn't necessarily need to be like your physical ability to go to a protest or something like that, but the accessibility to spaces where you can organize and things like that.
Yes.
And also, does the reforms we just saw, were they helping to expose were they keeping you tied to the state, begging for rights, and like making the state a necessity to always have to exist, and you always have to like worship it? Or is this now instead a vehicle by which you can like kind of utilize to your advantage to help further dismantle it? That's kind of the weird way that I look at it, at least.
Also, I really liked what you read out about like the proposed reforms to slavery, because it reminds me of that tweet that like Kamala Harris got a lot of dunking on during the primaries.
It's
right?
so gross.
And I just wanted to compare, right? Like in terms of the levels of like caveats and abstractions and nonsense, right? Her tweet was, yesterday I announced that as president, I'll establish a student loan debt forgiveness program for Pell Grant recipients who start a business that operates for 3 years in disadvantaged communities. And it's like, this is your brain on liberalism. Like, this is the shit that you need to put together to be like, that would be a meaningful reform that would help people. And it's like, no, it wouldn't. No, it fucking wouldn't. Like, how many people would get to unplug from capitalism because of that, right? And in the same way, right, if we compare it to the slavery policy you just read out, it's like, how many people would get to just not be slaves anymore because of that policy, right? Compared to if you just go, slavery is legal, like it's just not legal anymore. Can't be having slavery. No more of it, please, right? And yeah, like speaking of non-reformist reforms, one of those criteria we read up before that maybe is worth bringing into play actually is like, does it exclude a particular marginalized part of the affected group? And the outlawing of slavery in the US still isn't perfect, right? It actually says except for if the slavery is as punishment for a crime. So essentially, prisoners are allowed to be slaves in the law of the US, right, legally. And I would say prisoners are a pretty marginalized group of the affected possible group. Right?
Absolutely.
If all the people are an affected group, because anyone could be a slave, but then we're realistic about it. It's black people, because that's actually who are experiencing chattel slavery, right? People who commit crimes or are deemed to commit crimes for any reason are a pretty obvious marginalized part of that group. In fact, it could be as many as all of, again, people who are deemed to commit crimes or found guilty of a crime. It could be as many as just all of them. Like, we all know the American prison system is still full of black people, and that's because they didn't really let slavery go away, See how a reformist reform just lets slavery just carry on existing? Like, I just want to go a step further, right? We read out, Nicole, you just read out a proposed reform for slavery, but the truth is they did just reform slavery. They did just do it. They didn't actually have a non-reformist reform. They didn't actually abolish it. They just said no more slavery except this thing. And so that became where they did all their slavery through.
Yeah. Like, I mean, the prison, and like, you can see this, like, even, like up until, fairly recent. I think there's still a lot of it going on, like, outside of, like, prison labor, but there's all that weird shit where it's like, they have, like, prisoners working in governors' mansions and shit like that. It's like that whole thing, and I think in Hillary Clinton's kind of memoirs and stuff, where she talks about literally like the slaves that they had from the local prison and shit like that. It's like, it's still very much a thing that exists.
Oh, totally.
It's performed.
The biggest prison in the US is Louisiana State Penitentiary, which is called Angola because the majority of slaves on the slave plantation that the Louisiana State Penitentiary is built on, right, came from Angola. And the population there is almost entirely life sentences and almost entirely black. It's just so this place physically was a slave plantation, and it still has the same nickname it had from when it was a slave plantation. And you've got a ton of black people there who have to spend the rest of their life there and have to work for no money and can't leave. Doesn't sound like slavery ended, does it? Right. Like,
exactly.
Yeah. Anyway, chat, how are we feeling now? More confident? Can we tell a non-reformist reform?
I saw someone literally say that they went from 0 to 1, so that's great.
Sick. All right.
But someone in the chat did say earlier, so there's no such thing as a perfectly non-reformist reform, and I think like, I get where you're coming from,
kinda,
right? But that's we obviously know that it's not going to like end capitalism voting for people. Like, I think that's what you mean, right? We know that. We're not saying that. Non-reformist reforms are just ways that we can help other people get involved in movements by having their life not suck as much, right?
Exactly, yeah. Like, ultimately, we already said this, right? But like, whatever your dream policy is that you're like, fuck yes, you're super hyped about, by the time it gets passed, they'll do some sneaky rat fuck shit to it. They will. Yeah. They absolutely will. They absolutely will. I mean, fucking look at this.
Like, add in provisions and everything like that.
The proposed abolition of slavery was just like, the law as it was written when it was proposed was like, slavery is illegal. Like, it was just that, right? And now it's like, slavery is illegal, comma, right? And it's they will change it to be worse. They will change it to be worse, but it's still worth fighting for it to be as good as it can be.
Yeah.
But again, only up to a certain amount of your effort, at which point your effort could be better spent helping people directly, which I think is the point I've been trying to get across here today.
Yeah, we saw some good 0s to 1s. That was great.
Yeah, that's great. I saw him.
Nice.
For sure.
Okay, well, I think do we have, everyone has their homework. Should we see if people did homework from last week? Because
that's what I was going to say. Speaking of 0s and 1s, 1s in chat if you did the homework last week, and 0s in chat if you didn't. But it's okay if you didn't and you weren't here last week. That's fine. Last week's homework was to get a first aid kit and learn how to use it. I did the homework.
Yeah, look at this.
I did it.
Look at this.
Who else did it?
I already had one in the hall, but I actually do, because it's a thing that I have to do every couple of years for work anyway, is to have like a first aid certificate, and I actually have to do like a little course thing. And so mine was up for renew, so I did that. And
nice.
Yeah,
that rocks.
Yeah, it's just something like to work in a tattoo shop and stuff. You have to know, for obvious reasons. Like,
yeah. This is an interesting one because it's like one that required spending money, and like people, a lot of people have still done it. So again, it's not compulsory. Like you do it if you want to do it. It's not a big deal if you,
Yeah, and people in the chat who are saying things like, "Oh, I missed it last week. I missed it," etc., etc. Like I said last week, there's always going to be reasons that people can't do stuff. Do not worry. It's not like, you're obviously not going to get in trouble. You're not going to get banned or anything for like having not done the homework. We give you these things to do, not just to make you do them. Ideally, we want you to do them as soon as possible, right? That's the homework. But just the fact that you're aware of it now. And or you're at least thinking of like, how could I do this? Or why is this important? Right?
Which is exactly what it is this week. Like Nicole already said, where it's about changing how you see this stuff, right? And so I would compare this to the homework we had 2 weeks ago, right? To go around your community and imagine how things would be different in your personal ideal world, like how things would work differently, right? It's about a new way of seeing things, right? I would love if people carry on doing that. I certainly have carried on doing that after I suggested that homework. I've carried on going around and looking at things and being like, yeah, that's how that could work. It'd be kind of interesting, like, and this is how blah, 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 right? Same thing this week. We want you to go out and look up what your electoral politics situation is, right? What possibilities for policies there are, and try and identify some non-reformist reforms. Unfortunately, there won't be many. That's kind of the whole game. That's kind of the whole entire deal. But do try, have a look.
Nice.
Cool. Well, cool. Great show, chat. Great episode 5. Can we get some bun claps or bun clap Fs in the chat? Bun clap F if you're not a subscriber. That's a follower emote. For us, the hosts. Wow, incredible. Incredible.
I'm so excited for us to get to talk about prison abolition. I hope Emmy gets a good mic soon so she can come on, because that's
that'll be really good.
That's so fun. Great, cool. Yeah. Well,
what do we? Sorry.
No problem. I was gonna say maybe I know the mods have all the shout out information for the hosts, but do we? I feel like if every time everyone just quickly shouts out their stuff, that's probably a good plan, right?
I'm Sophie. I'm Sophie from Mars. You can find me on all platforms as Sophie from Mars. I do YouTube videos. I do a bunch of political stuff. I'll release a video soon on YouTube, Sophie from Mars, about all the political stuff I'm doing, including a thing I mentioned earlier today called Cyberpunk 2022, A Direction for the Online Left. I feel like people should be getting hyped about that. So get hyped about that. And also go to patreon.com/Sophie from Mars to help me pay for rent and bills and little dresses and drugs. Okay, I'm done.
Great. I'm DJ Mule. I'm DJ Mule on Twitch. I'm DJ Mule _ on Twitter. I just do kind of React Andy, the content that we were talking about earlier that's not that good. It's not that good for
That's not
anyone.
what you're saying.
No, I'm okay, but whatever. That's what I do on Twitch. I do that Monday to Thursday, and I'm also doing I'm working on a YouTube video at the moment about how debate bros suck. Right, so that's on my YouTube. Yeah, well, it's controversial. I know it's controversial, but like, there's a lot of bad stuff that goes on, and I'm working on a video about that. Like, the rough draft is done. I just got to send it to like Sophie and Tim and Bunny and various other people all across YouTube and be like, is this right? So yeah, look forward to that. That's on my YouTube, but that's going to be DJ MU3L on YouTube. So yeah. What about Tim though?
All right. Well, I'm Conquest of Dread on Twitch and on YouTube. On Twitch, I mainly just like play games and talk shit. We get a little political, but it's mainly just like, just games and talking shit. And it's when I stream is usually pretty late for a lot of people in America or very early for people in the UK. And then on YouTube, I've got a bunch of video essays and things like that. And then I'm Dread Conquest over on Twitter. And there I don't know, just shitpost. Which brings us back to our delightful host, Bad Bunny. Everyone knows who she is. So.
Yeah, you can follow me here at the place that you all are. Remember, chat, I will be rebranding soon. The only thing that's stopping me from rebranding is finding an available name. It's very much more challenging at this point. I feel like
Nicole
it's because bots are just like buying away everything.
So then we're all just on the same red planet wavelength. You know, we'll just change everyone to From Mars.
Yeah. So, but just stay tuned for that. And you can follow me on Twitter at twitter.com/badbunnytwitch. And also join our Discord. We always watch stuff after every stream. We always watch a show or movie or hang out and play games together or whatever. So feel free to join and everyone's welcome. And
stay tuned because I'll be on tomorrow. I'll be on Nicole's stream tomorrow.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we're going to have a really great conversation about two very important topics. So yes, it'll be great. Cool. So tune in tomorrow. Chat at 10 a.m. Pacific. It'll be Sophie and I streaming, and it'll be great. Maybe also work out, but we'll see. We'll see if we get to it. Hopefully.
Good night, everyone.
All right.
Good night, y'all.
And as you will soon find out, you cannot defeat an enemy that you cannot see.